no Northwest Indiana, Southwest Michigan pride. We bring the grit, bring the fight, bring the drive. Kalamazoo, New Paris, Hartford too. Galesburg fever when the green flag flew. Limited late models, street stocks, front wheel drives. Hash on the fenders, truth in the speed. Hear that rumble in the stands. Bumper to bumper, side by side. Every green flag feels like pride. Every lap is hard-earned time. Top row, grassroots to the core. Top row, keeping every memory alive. Top row, hear that roar. Short track in our veins, we chase the name to the flames. Northwest, Southwest, one loud line. Top row, take the crown. We came to lift this short track town. Camera on the chaos, eyes on the break. Door-to-door battles, every move they make. One more lap and the whole world sees what these corners mean to these. Just raw race nights and a whole lot of hope. Late model thunder, stock car steel. Front wheels clawing through the wheel to wheel. We feel the thrill. Feel the pressure, feel the heat. Every green flag shakes the seed. Grassroots kingdom loud and proud. Just race day grit in a hometown crowd. Top row, grassroots to the core. Top row, keeping every memory alive. Top row, hear that roar. Short track in our veins, we chase the name to the flames. Northwest, Southwest, one loud line. Top row, take the crown. We came to lift this short track town. From the backstretch to the last turn bite, we keep the heart of racing in sight. Kalamazoo to Galesburg glow, that short track fire we help it show. New Paris banging, Hartford shaking, every lap worth taking. Top row, grassroots to the core. Top row, keeping every memory alive. Top row, hear that roar. In our veins, we chase the name to the flames. Northwest, Southwest, one loud line. Top row, take the crown. We came to lift this short track town. Top row racing media. One track, one row. Whoa, top row racing media. We want more. This is what we live for.
All right, Buju, we are live on Top Row Racing Media. It is a Monday. I know it's a stormy Monday for some people, but it is Monday nonetheless, and we're ready to move into the next week of racing. So again, everyone share, like, do whatever you can, help us get this out. We have Ron Verash. He's already in the staging area. So again, he'll be on in just a few minutes here at 7:05. And for next week and the next couple weeks, we're already booked up. We have Tim Dibble who'll be joining us again next Monday at 7:05. He has the whole episode, where last couple weeks we've had a stacked episode. So we're kind of giving some breathing space with Tim, because we can cover not only his racing career, but then obviously being an owner, the Hartford season that's coming up. And then on May 11th, we have Rich Bull. Again, that was a reschedule from a few weeks ago, where Rich Bull will be right on at 7:05. And then we're going to have Kalamazoo announcer, mini wedge announcer, do all the things, Joel, front-wheel drive racer, former front-wheel drive racer, I should say, at 7:35. And one more reminder, on Thursdays, Buju, we have the Thursday Night Throttle. You and I, again, are back on Thursdays at 7 p.m., where we'll be previewing the upcoming week, especially with Kalamazoo having Alamo Township Night, the Autism Awareness. New Paris has the V8 special with the cabin fever and just so many other things going on in the area. But holy cow, what's going on here? Oh, wait, I hit the wrong
There
button.
we are. There we are.
We're
We
back.
were lost in the abyss for a
We
second.
were lost in this. But anyways, welcome to Monday.
Yes, sir. A very good racing weekend. A big win in NASCAR for local interest. Carson Hosevard
Yep.
picking up his first NASCAR win. I was at M40 this weekend. You were at New Paris. How was New Paris for you over there this weekend, Lewis?
Man, that four-cylinder class, Sheldon Ledlag, he as one of the few front wheel drive racers out there, the outlaw style front wheel drive. I mean, he once he got out front, he held it, and he had an answer every time those mini stocks were right on his case. There were some cautions where I thought, oh man, this is when the tide's going to turn. But I mean, he held everyone off, and Chris Harmon did a really hard push at the end and was racing right. It's not a bad thing. They
Yeah.
were going to drag race to that front stretch, and Chris just ended up going in the infield, still crossed second. It reminded me last year of the finish between Logan and Kyle in the Outlaw race, where they kind of like a drag race. But huge kudos to Sheldon. That was an incredible race to watch. Andrew DeVries put on once he got that lead, I kept thinking, okay, we're going to get a caution at some point. No, once they figured out how to like start, then they third time's the charm, and they did it on the third time, and they went 30 laps green from that point. So other than the I wouldn't even call it jackrabbit. I think the outside clean didn't hit the gas pedal soon enough. So I don't think that was Sage. It was a nice rolling start. I think that was on the outside car, but whatever. I don't race in cars, so I'm not going to judge. But I thought Sage was doing what you would do at Kalamazoo. You get a nice rolling start and you get going. So the outside lane was not doing that. And so, but once they figured out how to do that, they went green and did that. And then the limited late models again were light on numbers. They had about 9. One unfortunately hit the wall in the heat races, but again, not everybody was there. I know there are a couple cars who's still planning to race at New Paris. And so I thought, they put on a nice race once again, kind of like once Bug got out front, it was him or a mistake was going to change. Right. And so, and then the Hornets, they had a few mishaps, but other than that, they put on once they got going, right. It's like everyone had to get the jitters out. So, for people who didn't go, I know the Notre Dame Blue Gold game was going on, and that had like a record crowd or something crazy that I saw. So, you're going head to head with Notre Dame. That's hard to compete with when you have so much going into this next season after the playoff snub last year. I think there's a lot of motivated Irish fans to, get this revenge tour going. So, yeah, if people missed it this week, we had the V8 Classic, which is the trifecta, 1,075 to win for for limited lates. Kalamazoo's in my head, outlaw limited lates, but we got rid of the outlaw name up there too. They're just limited lates. And then modifieds, 1,075 to win. I believe both are 275 to start. I'll have to double check. Don't quote me on that. 250 or 275. And then street stocks go for 1,000 to win. So those three classes for the first leg of the trifecta. So I'm looking forward to that and seeing what they can do. But I know M40 had quite the show. So what did you think about M40?
They did. I think they had 22, give or take one there. Crown Vics, factory Fords, whatever we call them these days. They put on an excellent feature. There was a great racing up front and through the field. Michael Solons took the win in that one, so that was a great race. They had a star-studded street stock field, multiple class champions from everywhere. Yanis won that as well as the limited late model feature there. But yeah, they had a good crowd. And let me tell you, this deep fried Uncrustable, I've been going to M40 for 3 years now, and I kept hearing about this Uncrustable. I finally tried it on Saturday. The hype's real. That Uncrustable is unbelievable, dude.
Oh yeah, that first season when they took over, I think they brought that towards then, and it's as advertised. And that year, Megan did a video on the concession stand where they had like the powdered sugar, where they did like this whole thing, and I'm like, okay, if that doesn't sell any, then I don't know what is, because it's like when you go to a movie theater and they have the popcorn on the screen, and all of a sudden you're like, I want popcorn. There's that, but I know that Sheldon's on here already, so I hope you guys enjoyed the race at New Paris. And you know me, I'm not a big like on Mondays not to show comments thing, but again, it's what Sheldon did in that race was just I think when people thought this class, they thought the mini stocks are going to come in, beat them all up, and there's not going to be any outlaws. But let's be frank, that class was struggling for numbers. You had 5 or 6, and most of them were family. And then, mini stocks, they had pretty decent numbers, 10, 14, 8, 12. It just depended on the week. But, I've been a big proponent of ABC. I know not everyone likes ABC, but if you already think about it, New Paris essentially already is running ABC without calling it ABC. You have the 4 cylinders, which would be your A group. Then you have the fastest Hornets, which would be your B, and your Hornet B features your C. ABC, you're already doing it. So I don't, it's a perception thing. You just have to change the mindset around that. It's still a feature, but again, there's just huge kudos to Sheldon. He put on that race was just, if people haven't watched it yet, go back and watch it, because even Jeremy Wardinger's like, he has a Pride of Lions on his, and there's no space. I mean, he didn't crash anybody. Kudos to Chris Harmon and that group behind him. They had opportunities where they could have dumped Sheldon and they didn't, right? So kudos to them. I know taking 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th is, wasn't on the bingo board, but they had opportunity to destroy cars if they really wanted to, and they didn't. So huge kudos to the Harmons and everyone behind Sheldon on that they showed what that class could do if given the opportunity. And Sheldon races with national compacts, so he's raced with mini stocks before. It's not new.
Champion in the series.
Yeah. So so again, that was fun. But other than that, I know Ron's been hanging out, and I know he was at M40. So why don't we bring Ron on? And Ron, what did you think about M40? Because that was your first time back since the April 11th show. So what did you think?
Yeah, I will say, once Kalamazoo got rained out, I said, okay, there's about 6, 7 more cars coming, and other tracks not running yet. I thought, okay, we're going to get a couple more sneakers in there, and sure enough, it did. I was surprised by the Crown Vics. I thought we'd see 14 or 15, and we had some more of the South Bend area cars roll up there too. The Holloway clan was up there, and that 01, and he runs pretty good. That reminds me of a McLawn car, but I think that's Babinger in that car, and he had a good run. But having 18, 19 of them, and then limited lates are still light a little bit. I mean, it's just like this class has got to get going at some point. And, it's like you just keep wanting to see more on the track. And I mean, 7, 8s, everybody wants to see 16 or 12 or 14. And so that's getting on. Street Stocks, like Buju said, that was a talented class. When Bobby said he was going to head up there, Stremy and Town was up there, then the Gaines cars, that's going to be a quick boy there. And I think they had like 18. And there's still like 5 or 6 that weren't there that you would probably see in week 3 or 4. And then I say the Pro 4 class is extreme class. I think there's 12, 13 of them, and a lot of mechanical issues in that group there. And then the Road Warriors, I think there was like 17, 18, and that was a good show there. Extreme Stocks, I think they had 9. So I'd say 93 cars, and I'm going to say about 850, maybe 900 people were there, right around my guesstimation. And, a lot of South Bend area folks were up there, and some Kalamazoo people were there just when they were looking at the books and we're talking and stuff. And a lot of them were commenting on your show. They were like, always saying that you're going to be in that Lewis show, aren't you, Monday night? I said, yes, I am. I said, we're going to talk about some more big names and stuff. And they said, that's a really cool show you guys are doing. I said, well, Lewis is doing it. I'm just a subsidiary of it down the line here and stuff. But entertaining show. I thought, oh boy, they're hot lapping 4 cars and 5 cars at a time. I thought, oh, we're going to be starting late. Then it took a couple cars to oil the track, and next thing you know, they're running a little bit behind. But the crowd was very, 65 degrees and sunny. They had a lot of patience there and stuff, and a good show. I mean, it got done, I think, at 10:58, 10:59. I know Travis was watching it with his watch, and it was a close call there, but good show. And I got the one interview with the guy with the VROA. That he had 13 of them there, and that was his first ever win. And Dave Sensabaugh was his mentor, who was there in person watching it. And then his dad Bob, who used to race super lates, was actually in the camper and stuff. So it was a good show, and got a little cool at the end of the night and stuff. It's kind of a warm-up act for McLawn Neck this coming week. So it's like the little bit of the travel to set up, to tear down and get home. And it's like, boy, this next week's going to be about 6 more hours added to this deal. So I gotta have my Wheaties ready on Friday night there.
Well, I think that's, just to kind of go back to your comment about the show. I mean, wherever I am, I've been getting a lot of reviews about the Monday Night Rewind, and people look forward to listening to it. And as I've told Buju, what I really like that we do is, I feel like, we're giving a lot of people who probably wouldn't be on a podcast a chance to be on a podcast, a chance to tell their story, who they're about, the people who you're going to see walking, through Walmart and Meijer and, Dollar General or wherever it may be, right? Like, it's always, you see some podcasts, national level, regional level, that they always just want the big names and the big people and the big sponsors. And it's like, that's not what Top Row's ever been, and I'm so glad, having Buju and of course Drew Jack, when he's able to be around, that, they support that vision. Like, let's get the Night of Destruction people on here. Let's get the front wheel drive racers. Let's get street stock racers who maybe they're not going to win, or, they might not win the feature, but they're going to be there. They're going to pay the same $35 pit pass as everybody else, or $30 that, Megan and Leah, getting them on there. And I see Russell's is on here, and we have some big names coming up too, that it's like, I really like that. And I think that's what a lot of people appreciate about this, at least from the feedback that I've been given. I'm like, well, I'm so glad that the philosophy that I've had behind this is translating, right? Sometimes you just wonder, like, is it translating? And, again, it's, I'm not metrics driven. I watch metrics and I look at metrics because I want to know the metrics, but that doesn't change what we do. If anything, it's, each week the show, we get more and more viewers, more and more things, and it's because everyone's supporting, and that's what I appreciate. And, I appreciate you taking time out again on your Monday to come back and tell more stories. And I'm like, we're giving you the whole episode again. So, I hope everyone puts comments in here to ask you questions, because again, once you get the floor, Booge and I are just going to listen. We're going to let you go.
Like you're talking with the classes, and we talked about lesser classes years ago, make better racing. Two pairs combine two struggling classes. Now you got a great show rather than two yawners. And I mean, I'm glad 40 did the same thing up there with the mini stocks and the Pro 4s, as I would call them, super compacts. And, it's like, you got to get some cars in a race. And like I say, when that Crown Vic race happened Saturday night, there was like, everybody said, this is going to be a good race here. And Sullins got up there, and the Terrys were racing. So I thought they were going to put each other in the wall. That looked like the Sullins Cook deal a couple of weeks ago. One was putting the other one right up against the wall, and I thought, oh boy, we could have some deals here. But Sullins held them off at the lap traffic, and I mean, it's about racing. We talk about exposure, and like doing those interviews years ago, I started them, and Pierre, why are you doing it? I'm just going to do it on my own. No one's paying me. I'm not getting a cent doing it. I'm just going to put it on my own pocket and do all this stuff. And, then you look at 10,000 views by Wednesday, Thursday, and it's like, hey, we're making some, progress and stuff. And, it's like, you got to give these guys exposure. It's just, we can't be just what we read in the old race paper, because there's no more race paper. We can put stuff on Facebook. Half of it's going to be kind of like fighting terms and the negative about it. So we get these, interviews put up there like what you're doing. I try to do what I can when we're up here, and then especially down south. And even my sponsor pictures, I haven't taken sponsor pictures for over a decade, and I keep pushing these guys, get your sponsors, contact them all year. You just can't wait till March and say, I need sponsors. I remember last year, what'd you do? Heck, I don't remember where I was at in points. Did you win any? I think I won 3. You just got to keep plugging this stuff. And, these guys hate put the bills, and you don't have cars on the track. And some of these drivers, I mean, I see a post on Facebook, I need a car, somebody to sponsor me. I'm going to race at 9 tracks, and I'm thinking they'll be lucky to be at 2. And then, what are you going to do afterwards? And I say, God, get a portfolio put together and just do like a professional presentation of what you got and what you look like, your family, and, maybe not your criminal record, but that work good for some. But, it's all about exposure and, being satisfied fan wise and promoter wise, driver wise. And I mean, I'm looking at Bill, and he's like, man, I didn't expect this many people here tonight. That's a pleasant surprise, because sometimes those April shows can be real dogs for, being 45, 50 degrees, and you want to do the show and you get 300 in the stands, 200 in the stands, and you got 82 cars. It's like, ooh, well, the pit passes are going to pay for this purse, but nothing else, So, but yeah, kudos to what you guys are doing here, because it's not easy, and everybody thinks we all have copious amounts of time to do a lot of stuff. And, I still have a full-time job. I'll be doing probably an 11 or 12-hour shift after getting out of here. So we got it's just for another few more months yet, but we're getting there. But yeah, good show and great exposure. And I mean, hopefully all the promoters watch all this stuff too to see what goes down.
Well, and we have, Leah Dibble's always in here, and I appreciate her. But I mean, you see a lot of the same names every single week, and I try to give those shout outs because I want people to see, like, we see that, we notice that, and because I know it means a lot to Buju, and I know it means a lot to myself, and it's always that appreciation and staying grounded. I think Buju did a really nice post yesterday that he's not in this to get inside scoops. He's not in this to break the news. He's not in this to, have a stick measuring contest of numbers and everything. And that's where I think that's one thing that, even for myself, when I think about, like, when Springport gifted me that scooter that I fell off at, Super Shoe, but when they did that, right, like, I'm on the front stretch, but people know that's not me. I mean, you rarely see photos of me because it's like, it's not about me. It's about the drivers. And, that's what we sacrifice all these hours. And you with Miles going down to Mount Lawn. I mean, just think of the exposure for that track and how many people have learned about Mount Lawn.
That's probably why we have Crown Vics up here.
Yeah,
Very good probability there.
So it's like we're all doing our part, right? And it's, I think some people get in this to showboat and be the front of the stage and say, oh, I can do this and I can do that. And they forget the core of it, right? Some people do chase my favorite nickname, likes and money. And, some people chase that and go after that, but it's like, go do you, right? Copycat whoever you want, that's fine. Go do that, but it's not authentic. Right. And there's a way to be authentic. So, and you're someone who has done it authentically over the years where you've just found a way to make people matter and make them feel like they matter, especially with your Victory Lane interviews. Think of how many drivers you've probably interviewed who may have never even been interviewed before. Think of them got exposure that they wouldn't have gotten,
And Brady this past Saturday, that was his first ever win in the VROA class. And yeah, let's say, I know when we started doing other interviews at other tracks, a lot of drivers weren't remembering their sponsors. And I say, man, I was trying to either lip them to them or point to them in that. And I say, that's really important thing. You should really know this stuff. Now, don't worry about being a NASCAR guy that has this stuff stuck in his head, but you got to be ready. He said, oh man, he won. Oh yeah, I got to remember my sponsors now. And I said, give you a couple seconds to look them over. And man, it can go a long way. Definitely there. Be like missing a kid's birthday. Boy, you can't check over that if you forget, or a parent's birthday.
Well, that's when I did the Marf banquet. There's a couple people, like the one guy forgot to say his wife, and so we redid it because he knew he would not live that down if that got publicly mentioned. But even that, there's a lot of I felt like the kids, the mini wedge racers and all that, they did such a better job in many cases than some of the adults were, like, well, who do you want to thank? And some, wrote it down, but that's where I was talking with Kenny Head. I said, just think if this mini wedge program that they're building, I said, what if you took one day and no heat races, which I know that's like a triggering to a lot of people, no heat races, but, use that time to coach every kid on the property that day. We're going to practice interviews. Taylor, Cole, Kenny, whoever, all their volunteers, you can get KTS in there, whoever you want. Go around and interview each kid for a minute. Get them comfortable, because at the Rumble in Fort Wayne, I saw that where you just saw so many people freeze as soon as the pit road TV, which again, I mean, I would probably do the same damn thing. And I'm a public, I public speak, but you get a pit road TV and an interview right in front of you, and all of a sudden you're like, oh crap, but it's, how can you practice that? How can you practice those opportunities? Because, a lot of tracks, they don't have that extra announcer to go down to Victory Lane and do these things anymore like you used to in the day. So, who actually gets that practice, how do they get that practice? And so it's almost kind of, if you think of these college programs, they have people literally who that's their job, is to go and you practice media. Right. And so it's one of those things that, again, I know everyone appreciates what you do. And I watched that interview. I like the VROA cars. I always like watching them race. And I know my dad, Bob, he always likes those vintage cars too. And so I got a chance to be like, oh, I didn't even know I don't even remember that driver. So I got to learn about him, because you see a lot of the same drivers with that group, but every now and then they swap them out. So again, just, if you haven't been thanked lately, thank you again for, all that you do, because I know for so many people it means so much to them.
I know it's cool. Going back, I think it was about 13 years ago, my Warsaw Speedway did the photos there for 4 different events. And then the following year, they did the first show. They had the modifieds on the track at midnight, and that was the end of it. But there was a show in September, and Dave Darlin was going to be there to race. And that was his first time ever in a mini sprint. And I never thought that would be possible with all the years of racing he did. But we did an interview there. But there was another youngster I interviewed, little boy, and number 7 from Adrian, Michigan. And I said, John Nade, that might be a possibility, or Dane. And it was actually it was John's grandson. And so I interviewed him, and now he's racing all-star sprints and stuff. So it was like a pretty cool deal there.
Yeah.
And so it was like, then the mom came out, and then they thanked me, and because I mentioned John starting sod back in 1980, and then it kind of like it. Then another week later, the other family like, oh my God, that was really cool. You remember all that stuff back then? I said, well, we were just going through the pits. Emerson Axon, it was another interview we did down there at Warsaw one time with him when he was a little kid. So, and he's with the Road of Outlaws. So it's like those kids with those mini sprints, you never know where they're going to go. And then we had another one, Russ Gamester. He won a race there. I think he's racing for about the last 65 years, and he won the pro mini sprint feature race. And what an interview there. And I'm thinking, of all the things he's done, USAC Silver Crown, USAC Sprints, Midgets, Phoenix Mile, areas racing Warsaw on a Friday night, coming up from Peru. So kind of a pretty cool deal there. But yeah, like I say, exposure is the key, and keeping it positive, and people, they just never know they're going to put the camera on them. And, it's like sometimes I go in that, I'm trying to find Woodhall Friday or Saturday night, because he won that that stock compact race, which is a great race holding off Wood, and I couldn't find him. And then a couple other guys were like, oh, always get kind of nervous when you do an interview. And I'm like, well, all right. I told Travis, I said, well, we'll just pack up and get going, and get home and stuff. Be another day, another battle there. But at any rate, good to be on the show. And, we talked about favorite racing back in the day, and I kind of threw some other stuff together on times there was racing was really good. And I'm kind of whip through them here for a few minutes. But I was thinking about 1978, 78, 79, we were running slicks for late models. And New Paris was getting about 13 or 14. But of that 13 and 14, we had like Nairi, we'd have Terry Sineker there, Bob Carnes, Dick Barker. We would have Lyle Bailey in a 57 Chevy with putting slicks on it, like Keith Bailey putting on slicks, and Tom Davies putting on slicks to race with the Super. So it was like a 13-car field, but probably a 3-second difference, if not more than that, on times. And mysteriously, they came up with this Pro Track tire, a hard treaded tire, and they dropped a super late class. They brought up the hobby stocks to be like a limited late model, and South Bend, New Paris, Angola, Avila, Fort Wayne, Rockford, Kalamazoo, and Anderson all picked up that same tire rule. And that's when the ASA Limited Sportsmen started up. And those guys were all legal. So you had like your Wayne Lensings and your Wayne Swartouts in Wisconsin coming down, and Don Leaches and Rich Bickles racing, Tracy Leslie from the east side of the state, and Dennis Pennigan. You had Ray Fullen from Anderson area, and Fields. They had cars that were legal. You had your Fort Wayne group with Dancer, Chrisman, Stovall. They all had the same, then we had that race at South Bend, and we had, like, say, Charlie Hunt was in that mix, Garanser, Fred Reed, Malecki, Jim Blunt, Bobby Blunt, Tom Trimboli. And then we started having guys, because the cars are legal, they could travel. Now you have a car and you want to travel, it's like, oh my God, where are the rules going to be? Is it even worth my time to bother? Almost like the Wheelman series. Man, I like to show up that race, but I'm not legal, so I can't show up. But these guys are racing, and we went down to Indianapolis for a race, and say Vern Schrock, Buddy Schrock was down there, Trimboli was down there. I mean, it was just because they're all were legal. And so somehow, if we can just get some kind of universal rule set up, that would be so much cooler for guys that could just show up and race. Because even street stocks, a street stock's a street stock. Back in the day, a late model is a late model, but now it's like, oh my God, every track's got a little bit of an island different on some of these rules, and it makes it tough for guys to want to go back and forth, and they don't want to go and stand in tech line forever. I remember I was talking to Bobby Stremme Saturday night, and he says, we went to Owasso last year. He says, we were on the jack stands for 45 minutes. They were teching that car over like everything. And he says, and we're like, we know we're legal, but they were still going through. Yeah. Probably figure, hey, Bobby's coming 200 miles away. We better check these things out. And, but that was a cool time with that Pro Track tire with that hard tread it. And people complained about it, but boy, it slowed them down. I remember Leroy Skiles. Now, Denny would spin his tires, but he would still win a lot. And I remember Leroy was saying, actually, I'm closer to Denny now in times because he spins his tires where we can figure out the handling a little bit. He says we can actually maybe win a few races against him now. And actually he did. So that was kind of a cool time. Another time was like when Sod went to pavement racing, and they had Sod on dirt, sprints on dirt, and they had a villa with Capital Speedway in Fort Wayne, and Tom Ish was owning it. And they kept itching to have sprint car races. Well, your Thursday Night Thunder was kicking in on TV with this wingless sprints on Thursday night. Great show. A lot of guys from Michigan were taking the wings off with pavement cars. And we had, a group from Warsaw had just closed a few years before too. So Tom's like, let's put sprint cars on pavement. First show was at a Ville. I think it was July 4th for a race. And they had about 18 sprints. You had your dirt sprint cars putting on slicks for the first time. Hank Lauer raced some slicks before, but he had slicks. Then you had like your Mike Vandermoss, Bob Seelman, Jeff Bloom, the pavement specialists that weren't even like, you wouldn't even see the tires break loose in the corners. Well, Hank got the lead, and he's every corner, he's just like flooring it like a dirt car. And Jim Emstutz is like, this is going to blow up. This tire's got to be blowing up. Lap 24, the thing finally blew up coming out of 2. And I think Jeff Bloom took the win, but that next show they did it at Plymouth, and I think they had 15 cars show up. That place, I never seen a place so full of people. And Tom Ish put a great clip on. He showed Knoxville, Iowa for the Plymouth thing on TV, and it showed those cars flipping into the fence and over the fence, and people are thinking, oh my God, but then had nothing like that happen. But that was a great time in Sod, because then the Warsaw guys like Tom Patterson, Denny England, he started a long win streak at Fort Wayne, Bimgo Atkins, Tim Norman, even Tony Elliott came up race pavements against some of the guys with Jason McCord and Donnie Adams from down south. They had Gary Fido, Bill Tyler, Brian Tyler. They had Ron Kohler up north here that had a sprint car for years, but he had to travel. Now he's got shows in the local tracks now. And that was, got 35, 40 cars at a couple of the Labor Day shows. A lot of the fields were like in the 20s. And then Fort Wayne decided they wanted to break away from Sod a little bit, or with Auto Value. So Auto Value was kind of the Michigan group. He had his Fort Wayne group. There still was like 20 some cars in that group. And the races were still pretty good. Had Jerry Carey was another one that came about. And other guys just start showing up with pavement cars. And then Must-See showed up, and they kind of sided with Hoosier Outlaw Super Series. So that kind of put Auto Value on an island. So they kind of dueled a little bit. And then like with 3 years later, they're back to having one class, and they're like 12 cars. It was like, oh, they had so many cars. But a lot of those guys just got up in age. It's almost like those guys at South Bend when they raced those supers in the 80s. A lot of them were in their 50s and early 60s. And they're like, we can't keep doing this for another 4 or 5 years. This is kind of like a last hurrah for a couple of years. And a lot of guys are just getting up in age and just like, man, they're just done. And I think that happens to a lot of tracks with some of the, core drivers and classes. They move on or get out of racing, and they just, man, who's going to be the next guys that's going to be able to step up and keep that going? Because the V8 technology, it's like we're talking even Saturday night there, and the V8 technology, you open the hood and you know where everything's at. But these 4-cylinder cars, you open up a hood, it's like, my God, where's the battery? How many sensors are there? It's so much less mechanical, where they talk about the timing or the computer and stuff is so much important in racing. Now, someone's got the altered computer and their chips and this and that, where the old days it was just open your hood and, things were simpler back then. But kind of going back, we're talking about some more great times too, was Winchester, the Magnum Oil Series. Now, New Paris had them super late models. They opened the body rules up in 82, 83, big spoilers, longer noses. And then Winchester picked that up and ran a Magnum Oil Series. Linda Holman was running that. The Magnum Oil was out of New York, and they sponsored, and you had Bobby Blunt, and you had Bruce Hartlip, and Jim Cooper, Fred Hall, Dwayne McGonigal, Ronimus. They all were like on the high banks of Winchester with super late models with the big spoilers. And it was like, holy smokes, those cars there are some pretty daunting wrecks, but that series lasted, I think, 5 years. A lot of series seem to last about 5-6 years, and then it just kind of wanes a little bit. And another series that was cool back in the day was that Fast Series. They ran it at Fort Wayne. I think it was like 85, 86. Template late models, and it was Fort Wayne. And they had the Fast guy was out of Detroit, so they had some Flat Rock guys come down, and then Sandusky was on the schedule. But yeah, Johnny Miller, actually our Johnny Miller from Montville, Margie's and Leo's son. He was the rookie of the year in that, and he was a point champion too in that class. And then he had Butch Miller run it, Mark Johnson, Artie Summers, Chuck Rommel, Larry Knowlton, Bobby Blunt, Stan Perry, Larry Zent, Steve Chrisman, and just the names. They had like 24, 28 late models. And they had the first race they had at Fort Wayne. It was a Memorial weekend. Buddy Schrock was on the way to Berlin to race. He raced his car, and Butch Miller was there. Harold Cook was there. They had a big wreck on lap 1 on the backstretch. Harold Cook broke his wrist, but the car was still drivable. Butch Miller really wrecked his car. So Butch got in Harold Cook's late model, started on the tail. So they had about 17 cars left, 50 lapper, and Buddy was lead it. Here comes Butch, and Harold Cook's car beats him at the line by 2 feet. And it was of all things to get into another driver's car, not even understanding, other than, obviously foot pedal, and that all Butch needed to know, and then take on wins to race something like that. But a great series. It ran for about 3 years, and always had guys coming from the Cleveland area, Toledo, that would make that haul to Fort Wayne. And I mean, that was a great time. Another time was Galesburg, about 1980. They opened up the rules. That's when dirt was starting to do the big spoilers, and eventually, first guys that were doing it were Marty Crawford, Racer X. He had that big spoiler. He had John Dole, the Pineapple Kid, as they would call him. He would do the big spoilers at Dick Bissett, Larry Knowlton, Jerry Mink, Tom McGee, Debbie Nash, Ron Simmons, Tom Rugg, Freddie Cook, Bob Shippers. Then a guy showed up that we got rained out at Berlin for a ASA race. My buddies, Rusty and Randy, and I went, so let's go to Galesburg. Randy Sweet brought that car out, the red car with the big plexiglasses all over the car. And he had that thing parked kind of like right where you about pull out it. So it's like the center stage. So I took a bunch of pictures. Oh my God, look at this darn thing. That had the side pods. It had like a splitter on the roof, longer noses, and that thing was turning like 1250s. It's like, wow, this thing's really hauling the butt. And then later on, that's when he was setting all those track records everywhere. He'd go to Kalamazoo with it, and that's where he did that world's fastest 3/8 mile. Then he went to in Birmingham, Alabama with the 5/8. He went to Winchester. And even Junior Hanley saw him at Winchester, and he's like, my God, this thing's a weapon. You seen how fast that car was, and that thing was like down in the 14s. It's like this unheard of, slicks and everything. But that was some good times. Like only a 5-6 year period. Now I got one more. I flipped my page here. I had to write this up this afternoon, so I didn't want to forget all this. But kind of like going back with that, when we had that Haas series and that with the pavement sprints, and I remember Ron Kohler, he was leading the points for Haas. He had a chance to be on national TV with Thursday Night Thunder. So he's on TV for Thursday Night Thunder. It was on TV live. And Jack Hewitt clips him. And there's a good thing on YouTube. You can actually look this up, and puts Kohler into the fence and Hewitt's into the fence. And Kohler's car, I mean, they ran and they were checking him out. I think he had one wheel left on the car after that in the fence. And Ron says, oh, that damn Hewitt, I'm going to kick his ASS, And Ron's still trying to get out of the car, and he's like, oh, my God, am I sore? And Hewitt goes by, and he says, you all right? And Ron's like, well, okay. And just kept on walking. Never apologized or anything. And Ron's like, I want to kick him. I want to just whip him, but I couldn't even get out hard to get out of the car. Well, he was leading the Haas points. Next day was a show up here. And Kohler's like, I had to get another car ready. He had a scramble, different wing on it, different body work on. He had a piece of car together. He goes, man, I'm leading the Haas points, and now this thing happens of all things. But just some cool little tidbits back in the day with racing. I remember Plymouth in early 2000s when they had that outlaw sportsman class, and it was like Mike Malizer and the Stremmys were in that mix. And you had Fort Wayne cars when Ish had it as Capital Speedway, and those guys would come over from a villa in Fort Wayne to run on Sundays with Miracle Cherlowski buys you. They have 30 modifieds, you'd have 30 sportsmen. And then you had your Super Street class that was like Ray Baer, Greg Early, and then you had Jimmy Lambert coming around from Fort Wayne with that old 33 car, and 16, 18 of them. And then they even, had a 4-cylinder class, of course. And, but boy, you talk about some late nights. I'm glad I worked nights, because sometimes those nights on Sunday would run until 1 a.m. And it was like, people were like, I'm getting out of here. And I said, I can still sleep in and be at work tomorrow night. So I'm cool on this, but, just some good times for racing. And, like I say, it was kind of cool. Like when we did that 40 show, we got that lap board, doing this for things for the drivers and stuff like that. And we got the 3 to come up from central Indiana, and even kind of cool seeing those Ohio Wheelman. I mean, only had 8 cars, but I mean, that was quite an experience for them, and they had some really beautiful rides. Just got to get something figured out on the rules. But like I say, now the mini wedges have picked up, and you've seen a lot of kids that are, look at Pressler's daughter. I mean, I remember her crawling around at the car show, a little redhead kid, crawling on the floor, and now you saw her in the prom picture the other night, and she's going to be racing, be getting in the bigger cars, and it's like, oh my God, this is like a time warp and stuff. And even seeing Dylan and Nick Stremme when they were like getting Hot Wheels, and they'd sit with Carl, and now both they were racing and stuff. They're like they are, and but lots of good times over the racing years. And like I say, all you can do is just work on what we got presently going on. And like Lewis, you're up at Kalamazoo, Buju's bouncing over the place there and stuff, and we're doing the Central Indiana stuff in Winchester, and it's tough sledding right now. The weather can be so. I mean, you look at the weather forecast, and it's already saying 53 for Saturday, and I was like, oh my God, well, this is going to be a cold one, and it gets in everybody's mind, and they got to announce the weather every time they get a chance on TV or the radio just to get their hits. And how many times have they been wrong? But and then the rainouts, so many track owners, they see a 10,000 to 12,000 purse, and you got this race forecast going to be rain, and it's like, boy, do we roll the dice or don't we? And like say with Randy calling it on Friday night, and that was a good call because it did rain, and sometimes people call it and it's a sunny day, and everybody can't wait to show that pitch with the sun out.
Yeah,
that's what damn if you do and damn if you don't. But you got to have insurance, you got your safety, you got all your food prep, your time, driver's time, and what do you do? But like I say, New Paris this Saturday with that trifecta series, and say that limited late class, they got a dandy payoff for that. So hopefully they can get about 12 or 14 cars for that. I know the modifieds are still off this week, I believe. I think they're at Owasso. I think they're racing Saturday. So Mike the Gatton was even talking about he might be heading over there, but I know he smells New Paris money whenever there's a New Paris race because he always does pretty good. But hopefully, they get 10, 12, 14 of those mods, and the street stocks, they just got to get their cars out. And as simple as that. And, the money's right there. And, it's all you can do is offer the show and have them guys show up.
When I think the street stocks, like Nick Stremme coming back to New Paris, that was fun to see Stremme on the property, which I always enjoy watching a Stremme race. And I know obviously Bobby went over to M40, but we'll see what we get on Saturday. We have the three classes, but modifieds, I know last year, the first modified race at New Paris, someone decided to counter program New Paris on purpose. It was intentional, and everybody knows.
Yep.
Obviously we won't say who, but if you know, and that hurt New Paris, and that big damper on that. But the modifieds that showed up, Ronnie Maynard, did an incredible job racing that, and he proved that throughout, which, I mean, we know when he gets behind the wheel, he's a good one to watch. And so hopefully this Saturday doesn't look like any counter programming. Everyone's schedule has been announced and everyone knows what they're doing. So, I know with the Wassel, right, they have that big modified group going on now, that Midwest. So I know they'll get a bunch, and they get a bunch anyways. That's modified country up there between them and Springport. Springport, their street stocks weren't always the strongest, but they had a lot of quality, not so much quantity. But then those modifieds came out, and that's where, I fell in love with modified racing again, watching them at Springport. So, I know they'll put on a good show at New Paris. I'd like to see 14 of them, at least, maybe more. But I know with a lot of people like racing there in the modified, so they'll get their cars because, again, that's modified country. So, but that's where you were mentioning even earlier some of the mini wedge graduates. We had Evan on a few weeks ago. He's a mini wedge graduate, and then Cruz Everidge this past Saturday at New Paris. I know he made his big car debut in a front wheel drive at the Enduros, but then he also raced at Drew's show and unfortunately hit the turn 2 wall coming out during the feature. And that kind of ended his night there. But he did a pretty nice job on Saturday at New Paris, and so that was exciting to watch him pull in. We had quite a few new front wheel drive racers, Hornets. From a couple of them came over from Night of Destruction. But yeah, this Saturday should be a good show for the trifecta. Again, it's what street stocks come. Because this is its own point system. So if people want to race the trifecta but not commit to New Paris every week, there's points for the new Paris weekly racing, and then there's points for this trifecta where at the end, I don't remember what the bonus will be. I don't know that they've announced it yet. I know when they were on the show a few weeks ago, Chris and Tracy said they're going to do things a little different this year with it, but I know at least 1,000 to win minimum, this race. And I think the late models and modifieds are 1,075. I know street stocks are 200 to start. So, there's some nice money. So it'll be, who wants to come and play 3 times, because this will be one for the street stocks, and then Flagger Boy, I want to say, is the second trifecta race.
Yeah.
And then at the end of September 20th or 19th, whatever that Saturday is, 19th or 20th, it's one of them. That will be the third leg. So, and I think for the limiteds, this is their first one. Then the Sizzler will be their second one. And then the third one will be, again, that championship night. And then for the modifieds, I think it's the same setup. So Flagger Boy is the only one that's different because they don't race the street stocks on Sizzler night. But this will be leg 1. And then you don't, if you want to just do trifecta, you don't have to come back until Sizzler night, race the Sizzler. We'll also have Outlaws that night too, the Supers. And unless I'm wrong, I will look at the schedule again, but if I remember, that's the setup. And then again, championship. Everyone has the same championship in September, so which is usually blowout weekend. But now they don't do blowouts, so that's when the trifecta. So you don't have to commit to the new Paris for the full season race. This trifecta, it has its own point system. Bug took advantage of that last year. And I know he was on here a little bit. Again, congratulations to him. Just once he got out front, I'm like, the Batmobile has left the building, and Bugmobile, but and it's not even, I don't even think it's Batman this year, but he has a nice scheme. I don't know if you saw the picture of his lay model.
Yeah. And his lap times are like him and DeVries were like 13:30s. I mean, that's they'd be top 8 in a super lay model field there,
Yeah, Andrew was, so it was kind of the opposite. So in the street stock race, Nick Stremme was the one chasing down Andrew. Once Andrew got out front, there was some traffic that Nick had to work through. But then, if there was a cautionary, I think things could have got interesting. But, then it was the opposite. Andrew was the one chasing. He played the Stremme role in that race where he was chasing Bug. But Bug was, he was out selling popcorn and pizza and everything else. By the time that race was, everybody caught up to him. But that's where he was the trifecta champion last year. And I think Austin or Logan, it was Logan Maynard, I want to say, won the street stock, even though the champion on a regular night was Bobby, and then Logan in the late model. So again, for people who don't know the trifecta, or drivers who don't know the trifecta, it is different. So, as much as we love to see it new Paris all the time, if you only want to commit, to this trifecta series that are, I don't know the bonus, so don't quote me. That's a new Paris thing, but I know last year the champions got a bonus for that, so they're doing something different. But the payout's not that bad though. So if you're thinking to come down, you only have to commit 3 times to that.
Yeah, and hopefully those modified, some of those Angola guys. Okay, we're thinking of Awaso. They got 24 pretty good core cars up there. They got some other dogs that will be up there, and we're going to be a B main special. We go to New Paris, we're pretty much in the A main, no matter what happens. And a lot of guys just rather be in the A main than sit there and dink and dack in the B main, get wrecked or something, and they're racing for 9th place, get caught up in a wreck, and now they got 160 miles to drive home with a tore up race car. So that'd be interesting too with that Midwest series, because they're not really anymore. It's more like, Awaso's basically doing it with the Kalamazoo and then Berlin too. And so hopefully a lot of them guys still have those cars and want to keep running them. And because I know that they were really keen on a schedule, those different tracks. And sometimes when the series gets dropped, they're like, okay, it's not for them just to race the same track or something. They'd rather go to a variety of tracks.
Well, and I think, it's how many Ohio cars can we get, because there's quite a bit of Ohio modifieds that are kind of homeless right now. So
yeah, especially with Lorraine out and Sandusky out too.
Right. And so it's how many of those guys come out, with Hot Shoe moving to Kalamazoo this year too. It's like, could that impact, how many actually go, maybe would make that trip to Owasso versus maybe they'll go over to New Paris, because with Hot Shoe not at Owasso now, you don't, do they feel like they have to get as many laps in there to get the car tuned in for that huge race, because now it's not there. So, yeah, I don't know what to expect, but I know based on the racing this past Saturday, and it's V8s only on this Saturday, But this past Saturday, if that's any indication of what it could be this weekend, you know, I hope people give New Paris a chance to come out and see. And I just, even the food, they have so many new food options this year, even from the deep fried stuff. So if you like deep fried anything like Twix, and I forget what the other candy thing was. I mean, they have so many options. So, you know, if you don't come to often New Paris, at least give them a chance this weekend, because with the V8s there, you know, I know it's a $20 ticket, so $5 more than normal. But if you knew the payout, you know, like that $5 still isn't probably going to cover everything.
Yeah,
You
it's
know,
a solid payoff. Plus, you can still bring the grill, a
yeah,
cooler, you know, anything else, and do it a cookout and everything else. And you can get a volcano pizza. You know, so I've
well, and that's
done
why
that a few times.
I get frustrated sometimes when people go, "Where's the crowd?" Okay, well, they're sitting in their cars. They're, you know, that's the thing that I think hurts New Paris in a good way, is that people can literally sit in their cars and watch the race all around. You have people who are sitting on top of their trucks out in the parking lot. You know, someone was grilling across the way. That, yeah, sometimes the bleachers may not look full, but I promise you, it's not like empty. They're sitting in their cars, and there's tons of people under me that my camera wouldn't catch because there's too much in the way. But and then I always go, "Where were you?" You know, like it's one of those, like, you're on Facebook commenting, "Where's the crowd?" Well, where are you? You're commenting on Facebook, so obviously you're not at the track. So just shut the hell up, you know, kind of deal.
Yeah.
Like, no one
Even
actually.
when they did those one-on-one spectator races years ago, and it'd be like 100 people in the stands, last race is done, then they get the spectator racers out there, and all of a sudden another whole group of people just show up. You know, it's like, oh my God, where these guys come out of? You know, like they were sleeping in their sleeping bags or something, and up along the fence and hitting it and everything else. And how some of those cars would make it around the track. I just looked at the wheels, and then I'm like, my God, I can't even get my car to start, and it's got 4 wheels that roll, and some of these things look like they're about had it, and they're just running around the track and everything else, you know.
Yeah. Well, I know Boozer's been quiet, and I think he's about to burst from the seams if he doesn't. I know he has a lot of names that he wanted to throw at you to get some stories, and this is just a reminder that I do want to remind everyone. And I see, well, I'll do 2 reminders. So Chris Harry got in here from Hartford. They do have the throwdown this weekend for monster trucks. If people want to go watch monster trucks crush things over at Hartford, they do open next week for weekly racing. So for everyone itching for that Hartford dirt and their French fries and Coke and everything else next week. But monster trucks are this week for the throwdown. And then I didn't want to remind. Oh, actually, now that I did that, I forgot. Oh, add your questions in the comments. Certainly, you know, we'll pop them up here so that Drew. Oh my gosh, I cannot talk. All because of that damn monster truck thing. Thanks, Chris. But anyways, I had my train of thought and it went sideways here. Derailed. But anyways, you know, pop your questions in the comments and everything. That way, you know, Ron can answer them. I think Ron.
Stump the panel, as they call it.
Yeah, we have probably it's about 8:40 again. Is that when you have to?
Yeah, I got my hair all prettied up already, so all I got to do is just jump in the car and go. So,
and you said what, like a 15-minute drive?
Yeah, all but 3.8 miles, but it's a 15-minute haul. But you know, South Bend is good for, like, you drive to the next red light. You can see the light green as you're getting there, and just as you pull up, it just decides it's going to turn red. Then you sit there and you sit there, and then you go to the next one, and then the next one.
Yeah, so definitely we have a little less than an hour with Ron, so certainly a lot more time to go. But Boozer, you have been way too quiet for like 49 minutes here, so I think that's probably a record, you know, for you. And you're excited for this, so go.
Yeah, you've talked about all the great traveling series of the past. So instead of going to the past, I'm going to ask you about the present. What are the traveling series that you're a big fan of these days?
Oh boy, that's a really good question there. Because with me with McLawn, I'm very limited where I can actually go on. You know, that's a 320 already. But I would say the High Limit Sprint Series, even the Road of Outlaws, they got some really good presence on TV. And if you don't have the subscription, you can watch it the next day. You know, like on YouTube, the tape delay, and watch the races. And they've been doing a good job with interviews, and, you know, up on the stuff there. And the camera work's been really good. Boy, other than that, I would say probably the Star Series is pretty good. You got some guys that are committed. I mean, like Winchester, they had 26 cars there last year. And most of those guys are really pretty much out of Wisconsin. Thank God for the ASA Series kind of combining with that Stars deal and getting some guys to come over even to Winchester from that. But those guys are all coming from Florida, North Carolina. and even, down south. So they're doing a lot of hauling just to get up to do them shows at Winchester, Toledo. I think Owasso's got that weeknight or weekday show too as well over there. Boy, other than series, I have to think about this because they don't really cover series like they used to.
Yeah.
I know that Hell Tour, something else is coming up, 29 races in 30 days.
Mm-hmm.
And we followed that for a couple of days here and there. And that's their, on dirt track, your setups, you're going to get dirty doing that. And it's, so you drive to the next track, you clean up a little bit and you're at the track. And then it's always been pretty hot. It's always a day where it's pretty hot and you're, like it just really wears you out. You got to make sure you can't just drink pop and candy. You got to have some water in your system too to do that kind of stuff. Boy, I mean, All-Star Sprints, they're starting to do, the Great Lakes Series is pretty good. They get over at Hartford. All-Stars, they're starting to just rebrand themselves after being away from last year. They're a lot more Ohio Series base. They're going to try to bounce out a little bit there. They're great. Oh goodness, Andy's series, getting the guys on dirt and kind of get them over on the pavement and kind of back and forth there, and some of the variety there. Goodness, I'm going to say that's going to be pretty about most of what I would really follow, other than just seeing divots and stuff on Facebook and stuff like that. And because once we start doing that down south stuff, you're pretty consumed with the interviews and then the pictures, and then if we're doing a lap board, and it's just. It kind of ties you down a little bit, especially, full-time job too. So it's like, you're really kind of hindrance in what you can do. Cause I know them guys at Bill at Kankakee, come on, bring your books. I'm like, man, that's 250 and that's another 320 on top of McLawn. That's a 600 weekend, So I'm pretty parched right now, just doing a 40 or a Hartford McLawn weekend there. We're talking about travel earlier, even last Saturday night. And Bobby said, travel is not for everyone. A lot of people, it's like, what Lewis does is pretty damn crazy there. And what we're doing, it's like people are just like, man, I would never do that. And you don't really see too many people that travel more than an hour to a racetrack. And that's where you're, like when even promoters, when they want to set a show up, try to keep your base is really within 45 miles of the track. And how do you market it? Do you do Facebook? Do you do radio, TV? I don't know if that would work so much. Hopefully like some sponsors get on Lewis's show and do some sponsors on here, little clips and stuff about their shows coming up, even for a nominal fee to people to watch it, know what's going on. But that's pretty much about it. I know my McLawn schedule. I'm going to try to piggyback Lewis on a couple shows when I'm freed up that way, and then try to get to 40 and a Hartford, 2 shows there. And I'm trying to watch that super modified series out of Ohio, that 360. Now they're traveling like the Wheelman is, and it'll be interesting to see if those guys want to do these 220 trips, 240 trips every other week or so. It's a lot different than doing a 30-mile drive. I'll be the first to attest to that.
So we do have a question from the chat. Scotty Slusher is curious if you remember Cindy and Lou's tow vehicle. Cindy and Lou's Jeremy, that would be, obviously.
Their tow vehicle. Now, I remember that hauler that was the black rollback that had the white body on it. I think that was one that Nairi had for a while, and then Lou got a hold of it, if that's what we're talking about there. Sure. And that was a big old one. Dick Kirkman had one too, and then Rick had one as well, like a rollback. There wasn't too many rollbacks up north up here, but that was one of the haulers that they had back in the day. Boy, I'm trying to think. Nothing else really stood out of anything. I remember I got a picture of Lou sleeping one night at South Bend on the hauler. And I had a picture of him sleeping. Melissa Stemis was sleeping one night. And I was kind of like almost within like a year or two apart there. So I would post that picture. Come on, Lou, wake up. It's time to race. But that might have been what they're thinking of.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier that being so taken back by Dylan and Nick racing now. So what are your earliest memories of Dremmy's racing? Now that we're onto this generation, even Hayden's race, mini wedges and so forth. But,
it's like
what are your earliest memories of Dremmy?
Oh, the earliest memory, like say I was helping Fred Malecki, and this guy was going through the pits holding the boy, and his wife was holding another child, and that was Lou asking about getting race cars, asking a lot of questions about getting into racing. And Fred was like, who is that? And I said, well, the guy's name is Lou Stremme. He's going to try to get a stock car. And he ended up buying Bill Wingate's car eventually there for the following year. And actually, I think he raced it at Anderson. I'm going to say, because I was in Fort Wayne at ITT, I think it was 1981. He took it in a September race at Anderson for a street stock. And there was a silver 53 there. and I caught a glimpse of it, and there was about 30 cars on the track, and that was like I said, I think that's Lou Stremme, that guy that he just bought. That's a Wingate car, and then he won his first race at Kalamazoo the following year in a Thunder car class on a Sunday afternoon with the Supers, and it was 82. That was it was 83 for that Super Mod, so that might have been 82 that he had that car at Anderson for the first ever race. Then, like I say, then Cindy started racing. That was kind of funny when Cindy would race. She could beat and bang them cars at New Paris mostly and at other tracks, and there the fans would go crazy. Boy, the minute they retaliated, oh my God, their fans were ready to, form a posse and go down there and beat the guy's butt, But wouldn't say she can get away with murder, but she had a little bit more leeway. And I think we're even talking about that show in that last episode when Steve Teskey was tipped at her, and they had a red flag at South Bend there, and Steve got out of his car on the backstretch. Cindy was in turn 4, and he's running across the track. He's going to take her apart. And by the time he got to her car, he couldn't even breathe. He had tears, it was like just huffing and puffing, and they just hauled him away. And he was like, I couldn't even talk after that, because he was a big boy back then. He was like 220 linebacker running the 50-yard dash, and he was built for the 10-yard dash. But I think I even mentioned that to Steve at the car show one year, and he says, you would have to remember that, I said, in front of 4,000 people too. So it's Teskey, you're out of here. So that was the deal there with Cindy. But yeah, she won her first ever championship, and then ran a lot of New Paris, Plymouth, and Mottville, Thunder, when Ralph had at Southwest Michigan, because we're up there with Bobby Robleski a few nights, and that's when Lou and Cindy were racing up there. That was another good time, too, because he had McLaughlin up there and Lee Slayton, and then he had Andy Bozell coming down. So he had quite a few talented, and they didn't really have a super late model class, but they had kind of like a sportsman class, which is like South Bend's top class. And you had like Bobby was in that mix, and Chet Schwischer was in there, and Stan Carey 150. He was out of DeWijack, and Zachary was in that mix, Jerry Zachary. So they had some pretty good cars back then. That was kind of like that, say like a limited. And then they had the Bill Clewell class with the Thunder car. Then they had like a pure stock class. And Ralph was pulling 90 cars a week. Sometimes we go to Southwest for a 90 car show, get out of there, then shoot down to New Paris. Then you'll be able to see the intermission on the rest of the feature races and stuff.
What class are you surprised? Because even the first episode where we had you on a few weeks ago, you've mentioned a lot of different classes, a lot of different things for, a lot of these people in this, race fans now in this generation that may not know, like the Tri-State, which you talked about in that first episode. Mm-hmm. So what class, in your opinion, what class has kind of come around that you thought, man, this is really going to take off, and then it just died? Like it went nowhere, or it was overhyped and like this is going to change everything, and then it did nothing. Like
something I kind of grew up, and I didn't follow it early enough. We started about 73. My dad and I was ASA. Basically the ASA late model division. That's all they had was the one division. And I mean, we would, like a late model was a late model. I remember Jim Blunt ran one track one night. The next night he's racing the Redbud 400. I mean, you could do that with the cars. All the cars were legal. And we would do Toledo. We would do Winchester and Raceway Park. Then you had Arco, which was more Wisconsin base. But, it was like taking off. It was doing really good. And then next thing you know, TNN got the series. They were showing those races at Milwaukee, St. Paul, IRP, Winchester. Then it's like, oh, we're going to go to San Antonio, Texas, and we're going to go to Vancouver. And I'm like, wow, this is a lot more travel. I mean, a lot of us were like, we're not going to go that far. I think Charlie Hanna would have a story with that because he got an ASA car. And I think the first races were rained out. And he went to I think San Antonio for a race. Wasn't even in the show because he took the top guys from points from the year before. I think the first show was like in Florida. I mean, that was a lot more traveling what they were used to. And it took about 3 years after that. And then poof, they tried to go to like a restricted block motor for it. And then guys were accused of jimmying them up and that. And then the series just went away. And then they kind of kicked it back up again a few years ago. And a lot of people said, I thought the ASA was no more. And they said, well, they're just using the name ASA for a stock looking class. But boy, back in the day, my God, you had Trickle, Mark Martin, you had LJ Lines, Bob Strait out of Flossmoor, and then you had the Randy Sweets and Eddie Vanderline earlier in the days there. John Anderson from Ohio. Moose Myers would roll in, and then say Jim Blunt would be in there, Nyrie, Jigs Myers, Dave Sort from Fort Wayne, and just Chuck Rommel. I mean, you just had guys from the best of the best would be there for races. And
Alan Kowicki, Rusty Wallace, all kinds of names.
Yeah, Wallace came in there, and Kowicki, and that was just. I remember even a Wisconsin guy would always have that Wisconsin flag at Winchester. He'd wave it in the stands when they would do the parade and all that stuff. And I remember even a story with ASA. It was like 74, 75. Willie Stutzman's there, and he makes the ASA race. And all the drivers are shaking hands with the owner, and then they kiss the trophy girl. Well, Willie runs up, and he does his little jog with his arms, you know, like he's in a hurry. And he walks up to the trophy girl, and he shakes his hand, of all things. And he goes up to the Roger Holderman and gives him a kiss. And the fans just thought that was just the nuts thing, you know. I'm like, you know, oh my God, Willie, is this, you know, do we know him or not? You know, but I don't think Roger was expecting that as well with Willie, but quite the character he was whenever he was racing. And, you know, then he'd say he went on to, God, then he was racing the limited super mods, and he bought an Oswego super mod, and I was doing some of the travel shows with ISMA and Pennsylvania. He's in New York, he's in Canada. It's still, you know, nothing for him to be at Sandusky, Mansfield. I mean, he was traveling even at 65, 68 years old. Retired, of course, had a big motorhome, but always a character in the pits. And he was always a lot of fun. And, you know, he maybe didn't win a lot of races, but I know, remember Denny Nyrie says, boy, Willie's keeping me in business because Willie crashes so many cars and I get to fix them every week. He says, that guy just had one car and didn't wreck it. He says, man, I think of all the money he would have, but he would always have, he had a Grand Marquis car, he had a super mod, and he'd had the late model, and he even had that pace car, if you remember that back in the day, that 88, that Cavalier was a pace car at South Bend. It looked like his Grand Marquis car, in fact.
Go ahead, Buju. I know you have more. So
yeah, so you mentioned those ASA days, and I've become a big fan of those. I've been watching a lot of early 80s ASA races with Mark Martin and Rusty and Bobby Allison. You'd have Dale Earnhardt dip up from the south and run those ASA races, and he'd get his tail kicked in by those Butch Millers and Bob Senekers and those guys that run up here weekly. Just another great time for racing, like you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, and Bobby even raced up in Minnesota, you know, with Arco and stuff. And they had I have an article I was actually putting in one of the books this last about 3 or 4 months ago, and they questioned Bobby because he went up to race up at Minnesota Shakopee, and they said, why are you doing, you know, the guy says, why are you kind of doing this kind of stuff? And he's like, you know, he says, this is a lot of racers would love to race against me. He says, I actually like to race against some of these guys because these are some of the best in the Midwest. He says, I follow racing like everybody else. And he says, yeah, it's a little bit of a drive, but I can afford it. And, you know, he says, it's, you know, my pride might get hurt by getting 8th or 10th or 15th, but he says, it's still fun. And he says, yeah, them guys, Trickle Refner, you know, Schuler's up there. And like I say, the Wisconsin boys, he says, them, Joe Shearer, Bickle, he says, and them boys some pretty good racers. He says, you would have put Mike Eddy in NASCAR years ago, and he probably would have been one of the top drivers too. He says, these guys are just as talented as what we were. He says, we just had the opportunity being down south, and everything was down south. He says, you guys are up north. Not too many guys, you know, made the transgression to go back down south and do that stuff. I mean, Butch did, and, you know, Tony Raines did to a point, and Mark Martin did, of course, there. But not a lot of northern guys really transgressed down to the south and really became, you know, the big NASCAR deal. Now Carson, you know, after yesterday now, you know, right place at the right time with NASCAR. It's almost like club racing. It's like, you know, everybody's so competitive and they're all about the same speed. It's just a matter of who's lucky at the right place at the right time. And he would have been one more knocked out tire in that wreck. That would have been it for him. But, you know, he just, let's say he was right there. And I hate to see that comparison to Earnhardt because the kid's still young. Yeah. He's made a couple moves. He's won a couple races, but he hasn't won not anything of a championship at this point with that. And don't put all that heat on Carson. You know, you're going to expect him to make some kind of silly move every week. It's like, no, that team ain't going to be able to, you know, they probably say, you got to settle down a little bit here. You know, we got cars, but man, we can't be totaling things every week or anything there.
Yeah, it feels very unfair that he gets the Earnhardt comparison all the time, but it does feel that there's some sort of buzz around Carson right now. It does feel like he's kind of becoming the guy in that. The crowd went nuts for him yesterday when he was hanging out the front window out there going down the front stretch.
Yeah,
very cool.
You know, we had a lot of guys that were the bad boys got out of racing here. I mean, Kurt Busch, he's not really in the limelight so much anymore. Kyle Busch, yeah, he's here or there. He's arguing with his team, his owners more than he is, because he used to get kind of mouthy on TV. And people like that. Harvick, be like a little bit of controversy. You would have, you had near calm guys like Ricky Rudd. I mean, they just finished the race. Terry Labonte, they would finish the race. Bobby Labonte would finish the race. You get on Earnhardt, and he'd just say something that fans would be, wow. I like what he says to those reporters. I like what he says to NASCAR. And Carson's kind of like doing some things. And like I say, it's kind of like, and this guy's a little bit of a wild child a little bit. And he's a little different cut than some of these other guys. The other guys are almost kind of so prescribed or like set when they talk. And it's like it's only certain hand movement, eye movement. And they only want to talk about sponsors or, Carson's just kind of a little more open and, you can ask him something off the key and he talks back. And some of these other guys, I think they kind of struggle to talk.
Yeah. There's something authentic about him. I think you still feel the short tracks that he came from. He talked in, I think it was on the Dale Jr. show that he's on last year, that he was just the kid at Kalamazoo, and he still feels like the kid from Kalamazoo. And I think it shows through. And when he's hanging out the front door or hanging out the front of the car, celebrating his first Cup win. Yeah,
and he kind of he took that chance because, I mean, he was still learning the ropes at Berlin, racing some Kalamazoo, and, doing this, CRA stuff and that, and having some good runs. And it's like there was that opportunity to just put everything on the line and go. And he could have said, oh, man, let me wait about 4 or 5 years. Let me get more seasoned. Let me get more settled. But he's like, let's go. And he's making it work. And, it's high risk, high reward. That's for sure. They're doing that kind of stuff. And now he's like talk of the state or talk of the area for sure there.
You mean
NASCAR needed this too. NASCAR needed this kid to win something like that too.
I was going to say it was all over Facebook. I didn't even have to watch it. I knew what was going on. And I think Chris, who I'm sure you saw at M40. I mean, she's a huge host of our fans. So I can imagine all of her feelings that were going on, and she was actually quiet on Facebook, Bougie. I don't know if you saw it. She was quiet, so people were messaging her and posting like, "Are you okay?" Like we would have expected, a big burst of energy here online. I do want to do a quick shout out, really quick. We have Will on here. If you ever want to listen to the Wild Will, I want to make sure I say it right. Will, the Wild Will Throwdown. You've probably heard him on Pit Road TV. If you watch Speedrome and Salem and all that, he definitely does a lot down in that area. So he sees the Crown Vics down there. He was at Lorraine last year
he announced McLawn for a year too.
Yep. And
him and Harold Adams.
Yep. And definitely if you see him, he's always selling shirts and those go to different proceeds. So definitely, follow him on social media. I just saw that he popped in and, to have someone like him listen to the rewind and watch that, it's like, okay, wow, that's pretty cool. I mean, he treated me with so much respect last year at Lorraine. Pit Road TV had the rights to it. Or no, it wasn't Lorraine, it was Painesville, because that's where the Buckeye was. So not Lorraine, but Painesville. And I heard Top Row just as often as I heard Pit Row. And I'm like, man, they got the streaming rights here. I'm just some, guy, up in the corner over here. But he kept doing lots of shout outs for me and all that. So again, I'm a big fan of Will, but I saw that he popped on here. So I want to make sure that you were talking earlier about Ron and exposure and everything else. And he's definitely someone who brings a lot of exposure to short track racing, especially in central Indiana. So definitely someone to go watch and follow online. And I know he does like pre-shows and everything from Salem a couple times. He's done pre-shows. So definitely give him a follow, because kind of like Ron, like with you, he has those stories and he just does so well on the mic. But I didn't know he was at Mount Lawn. Yeah,
him and Harold did it for a year, and that was good. I mean, I think we have an announcer for full time this year. I'm hoping. I mean, I don't mind announcing, but kind of takes away from doing photos and stuff. But I still get to do my talking down on the infield and all that good stuff there. But then when you announce, it's like, especially when we had the computer go down and we can't relay a whole lot of information. I just go on a lot of stuff on who's who and kind of go from there. But it's still kind of cool to do that. And especially it's like you get all that running around in the infield taking photos. And when you announce, you just go up and down them steps. And it's like, how many more times I got to go from the announcer's booth down them steps all the way down them other steps and then onto the track. But it's still fun. And I try to throw racing terms out and what I know of history. And, everybody's got a different style announcing. Some want to just read just exactly what's in front of them, or some can ad lib. And, You won't never hear me scream or holler on there or anything like that, and people have a heart attack or anything like that. Just kind of like almost like Mr. Bunn up there at Hartford. I like how his style is. He just has that hometown name and just subtle, just says the name. And, he just announces like, Am Sutz was a good one too for that man to there, Jim M. Sutz out of Fort Wayne. I always like listening to him. And everybody's different how they announce, though, for sure there.
Well, and do you think too, like is that why people navigate maybe to, like we've been talking about Carson, right? He's just a different vibe than, what probably many people, I mean, there for a while, a lot of people just stepped away from NASCAR, and I don't watch NASCAR. I just don't have any desire to watch NASCAR. I may be weird about that. I don't, I'll watch local racing. I'll watch all the local people. I'll keep up with drivers who, I've met at Bristol and other places just to see what they're doing. But like, I watched the Daytona only because I wanted to see the MJ stuff, like if you didn't watch The Last Dance, you don't know what you're getting into NASCAR, because he's a pretty motivated guy. He has a target, he's going to do what he can to win. He's motivated by a lot of different things, and he finds this motivation. So that's the reason why I watched Daytona, but otherwise I've not watched a NASCAR race since then. Like, it got to a point where I'm like, this is boring. I can do a lot of other things on TV right now than watch this. And so, so with that, do you think even too why some people maybe navigate to certain announcers? Like I know you've announced, and you get on the mic for Michiana Vintage Racers, and you do a lot of storytelling with yours, and so you even present different than like when you get someone on there who's stats and stat driven. So, do you think maybe that's why too? You notice in racing people navigating towards like Carson just because of that vibe?
Now I wonder, and I don't really watch NASCAR religiously by any stretch, but I see him smiling a lot, and I see him you can see his eyes. And you look at like an Austin Dillon, he's always got the dark black glasses on, and he's got like the cowboy hat on, and always like, you don't know what their eyes, if they're closed or they're open. And it's like, seeing somebody with their eyes, you can see their eyes and their facial expressions. It's just like maybe something different. I could be wrong on all that, but it's what I've seen of Carson. He's always like, no sunglasses on, no dark glasses, and he's smiling, and he just seems loose, where the other guys are kind of like almost like a robotic, and even when they do an interview, I say, God, take them damn sunglasses off, at least let's see what the eyes look like, and, but it's just like like the mole people or something, when they talk during that. But that might be too. And like I say, they've got to get some kind of new flavor in that race scene, and something to keep it going. Because some of those guys' names are, you watch them race, but there's really nothing, no side stories with them or anything like that. I mean, Chastain broke a watermelon on the racetrack. Some of them other guys that they do this and that, but I mean, they might talk to them on a rain delay or something. But like I say, I don't watch a whole lot of NASCAR. Normally when they're on, it's like catching up on sleep, and then the yard. Like yesterday was all 5 hours of yard work with cutting all the grass at my dad's house and my house, and then might watch the tail end of a race or something like that. But to some extent, like you go back to IndyCar, how some of those drivers were more. Danny Sullivan was one that people really liked to watch. Mears was more talking, calculated. AJ, people liked AJ because he would just ball them, either his crew out or he would ball the officials out. There's times where, he voiced his opinion on different things, and some of those drivers are like that. And then you go to USAC, and then like I say, I interviewed Kaylee Bryson, and she's one. I don't think I've ever seen her with dark sunglasses on at a USAC race. She's always like smiling and just a fan favorite. And then she won her first to win a USAC Silver Crown race, first to lead 96 laps at DuQuoin. And I interviewed her, God, it was like 5 years ago now. And she was like, that was one of her first interviews, kind of her first paving race at IRP, and real personable kid. McKenna Haas interviewed her at Plymouth when she came for a race that got rained out from Iowa. And now, she's making strides in racing, and, it's, but some people are kind of stoked when they do interviews. They're kind of like, man, just, afraid to talk, or afraid to, kind of trying to talk too calculated. And that makes it kind of like say robotic kind of on that form there. It's kind of hard. Like, what do you ask them now? It's like to loosen them up or something here, Because I always like when Rich Bull would win, well, he would tell it like it is. He'd complain about somebody or something, or a restart or something. Yeah. And even Danny Brown, he's always a good interview too and stuff. Austin, he was really good. I kind of like when he would win so damn much. It's like, what do I ask him? What's his hobbies? What's his favorite food? I'm like,
Yeah.
he does it again. All the Maynards were like that. But some of those interviews were pretty fun. And, like I say, sometimes those guys got their first ever wins and they're like, Leroy Luna, he was something in the clown and a half maybe on his first race in that, and his family celebrating, and he was just like speechless. And I said, Leroy, you finally won a race. I mean, you guys are bringing 8-9 cars to the racetrack. And, then he had that one kid that one night won a race. It was one of the C-mains or something. His little kid, he's probably about 5'2", 90 pounds, and he stood on top of the car and bands went pretty crazy over him. But something out of the ordinary. It's just, make it stand out and, be that person.
So talking about Carson making it from the local area all the way to NASCAR, thinking back, who is somebody that you thought maybe should have had that big shot but never quite made it out of this area?
Well, you kind of think Nairi, would have been a possibility there with all the races he won. Like I say, he was just probably Northern. Mike Eddy was another one. He was hard charger in ASA, and he never really went to NASCAR. And I'm sure he could have had opportunities there. It was good to see David do like what he did there, and Ryan Newman, of course. Those guys made their marks there. Other guys, it's you go over the years. Maybe Brian Tyler with the sprint car racing. Maybe, Golsick and Bentley Warren, especially with the supermods, them two guys there won everything. I know Golsick ran IndyCar a couple times. Bentley, I don't know if he ran an IndyCar or not, but I mean, he could win in anything he was in. And sometimes they get, where they're just really comfortable racing what they were in and doing stuff there. Davey Hamilton Sr., seeing him race supermods and knowing him, and then he raced some IRL and got in that bad wreck, and then that kind of really hindered his career. And now Davey Jr. is racing, the sprint cars. Bobby Santos, he's one there right now that, he's a threat in Silver Crown, Midget, Sprint, the 500 series, and real hard charger. He would be another one. You don't know if he's really going to want to do the backing to try to do a NASCAR thing. In IndyCar, it's really kind of selective. There's not too many American guys that are really jumping into that series just the way it's set up anymore. And, the old days with, going to open wheel. Steve Kinzer was another one. He did IROC. I think he ran one Indy 500 when it was the IRL, and then that was really kind of about it for him. And he won everything you could think of. In Sammy Swindell, he went into the truck series for a couple years. Rico Abreu, there's another one that went into the trucks, like he was talking. He says, maybe it was a little bit too early for me to try that and make that work. And he's happy with what he's got going on with the sprint series right now. He's just a face on, he even did a thing about dwarfism on TV a couple weeks ago, talking about that. One of the most personal drivers, you think, oh my God, no one's going to be able to talk to him. And he's just as personable as anybody else out there in that, the sprint car deal. So,
I almost think we see less of NASCAR being the final destination now, with, like you mentioned, the high limit series earlier and the exposure they get on Flow and the other TV opportunities that they get. And you have the Cars Tour, who has those same opportunities now. And you mentioned ASA. And I with the Cup Series being such a tough road to climb, and NASCAR not even necessarily in such a stable environment all the time, I think maybe these local tour, not necessarily local touring series, but these touring series might become more of a main destination for, like, the Rico Abreu's and the Bobby Santos,
right.
And, the Jonathan Davenports of the world, where they're never make it to NASCAR. But I feel like these traveling series, they almost feel like they are their own mini NASCARs, like that ASA we had back in the day.
And it's busy, expensive. So many times you watch a Grand National event, and I rarely do, maybe early in the year, half the cars don't have one sponsor on them. And I don't know how these guys, it's just a car number and they're trying to make a race. And I'm thinking, my God, they're putting everything in one bundle to try to make a race. And they're going to probably get 26th or 28th out of it and 24th, no matter what they do. And it's like, man, there's just not enough sponsorship going on. And it's just like it almost looks like a new race car, like early in the season, they got a number on it, and then they might race one or two other races, and then that's really about it. And like say, it's such a different thing with that NASCAR stuff, the licensing, and then all the stuff that there's so many restrictions and so many things you got to go through. And like say, Carson made it where he's at right now. Hopefully that will open the door for other guys to kind of think about that. Like they got Chandler Smith, some of those guys that run the car series, Jeff Foltz. I mean, they've done some dabbling here and there, but the next big thing with NASCAR, there's going to be some other guys that's going to be calling in after a couple more years now, and then they're going to need another to keep this 38 car field. And they got to get 38 guys, 36 guys to show up weekly to make it work. And sometimes it's like you see them stands. We see stands at local tracks with 100 people in them, 200, 300, 400 people. And you look at NASCAR, some of the races, and it's like, wow, Bristol used to be a waiting list forever for tickets. And now you look there and you can just about anywhere you want. And everything has its time and everything, things go up and they go down, and, IndyCar's trying to do different things to make the 500 bigger. And they say they got, places almost like a sellout again this year. They need to make that happen at Iowa when they were doing something there, and they need to make it happen when they do other venues and other times, other shows. It's like on those road courses, they're interesting with all the camera angles, but you couldn't even tell when I watched that, I don't even know what hell turn 5, 6, 7, 13 is. It's just like you just see another turn and two cars racing, and that's it. And then there's a wreck, and the only time there's passing is when they're in the pit area getting a pit stop, and then there's a swap of spots. There's really nothing on track because it's so narrow, and it's just it doesn't make it fun. Like I said, when you watch a race at Winchester, and it's like, my God, it's the speed. Like when you were down there for the sprints last year, and they had some wrecks, and you just get to see the speed up close, and it's like, man, these guys are hauling the mail, And then when they get some wrecks, it's like, wow, they tear some stuff up pretty good. Yeah. And that makes it look like, wow, a wow factor to it. And
something I never realized about Winchester until I was down there. Obviously the banking is insane. Standing in the infield, it looks like you're looking at a 2-story building and you're looking at the bank standing from the infield. But the track, how uneven it is. It's dipped all the way around. Character. I love that type of stuff in a racetrack. It's been a racetrack since 1911 or something
1911, crazy. Yep. Otis racing, Otis half mile. Dayton was up there with it, but then Dayton closed up. But Holdeman had it, and the drivers were complaining about some spots they were bottoming out because you'd see the titanium sparks or the frames, when they were doing the Thunder Show. So Holdeman says, I want to repave the place. They repaved it to have it smooth, and I think it was a 4-figure paving job. I think it was like 24,000. I could be wrong, right in that range. And the guys went on it and they said, this is way too fast. Wait, there's too much grip. We're not going to race tonight. And they even canceled a Thursday night show because the midget drivers were like, we want to be able to, get back home tonight after this race. And they felt it was so quick, so twitchy. And so they tore it up and they repaved it again to make it a little bit slower, I guess would be the word. But I would have hated to drive down there for that race and then see that happen. But I remember they were like, then they were talking about the dangers of speed and everything. And, that's when that's where they're having some bad wrecks there and stuff. And, those open wheel cars, that's when Robbie Stanley passed away in that time frame with a wreck there at Winchester. Vogler had his really bad deal at Salem leading the race, and the car got up into the fence, and severe head injuries that took his life, and he was going to do an NASCAR the next day at Pocono. He actually came back to Salem, and then that happened. Dernwald's fire at Winchester. So it's like that's why they say a lot of open wheels don't want to go there, because it's like the chance of a really bad wreck. And 500, they kept saying we want to get sprint cars there, and 500 series like, nah, I don't know. And then they finally said we'll do it. They put a big purse up, and then we had 26 cars for that show. And they did tear some cars up. They had that 3-car tangle in 1 and 2. A couple of guys got in the wall. One guy had an axle break going into 1. I think they had 9 cars finish out of that 26 field. And they're coming back this year. The Silver Crowns were there, and they're just as quick, if not, with the smaller motor, but they're like doing 142 down the straight. But those cars are a little bit bigger, wider, stable. They're almost like tanks going around. And then just to hear those cars, the motors of those things coming off the corners, that small block just making that sound is like, that's pretty awesome sound right there. IRP is another good track to hear those cars with that motor, and there's some horsepower going on there.
So we talk about Winchester and its age and its character, and Mount Lawn is obviously a track that certainly has its own character. What are some other tracks that have some unique challenge, maybe in tracks that aren't around anymore, that maybe had unique challenges that you don't necessarily see so much?
Boy, I'm going to say, you know, that Gorky Park in Pennsylvania, it's on YouTube, and it's a flat track. It reminds me of a Montville, and they had the modifieds. They ran until 1986. There was like zero banking at that track, and you go on YouTube, and they had like the modifieds in the 80s. They had the old dirt modifieds with slicks on them, the dirt bodies. They had the newer Cavalier style. Then they had the homemade stuff like you'd see at Butler, kind of like that Mahoning Valley Speedway, where it was a lot of turns. And it was just a flat track. I mean, insurance would have seen that track now. They would have said, "There's no way you guys are going to race here," because the fencing was only, I think, just like 12 feet high. The tire could have went over the fence and probably wiped out a few people there. But that was a unique looking track. Boy, going over the years, you know, Kaukauna, Wisconsin National was a 5/8, big track. That was a lot of speed at that track up there. And they do some shows on the 5/8, and they got a smaller inner track. Ileana was a unique track in the sense that it was flat, and it was a half-mile flat. And then they had that drag strip quarter mile on the inside that the Pure Sox would run in the Fort drives. But that was the very little passing. They had the sprints there, and they had the radar gun, and they were going 145 down the straightaway there. They were just whipping. And at night, the humidity was just right where you could see the vapor trails when they would go by. Plus, the stands were pretty close to the fence, and you could feel that when they would go by, you'd feel that wind gush, you know, like the kicking of the wind and everything go by. And, you know, they had about, I think, 6-7 shows there and stuff. And, but so flat. I mean, we had the vintage cars there, and guys are like, that's a fast track, but man, is that flat. You know, you don't want to go, you know, all they were doing is past was just rip the guy on the inside enough. You knock him loose, and he goes up high, and then you whip underneath him. I don't think I saw 5 outside passes there all night, but yeah, another unique looking track there. Kind of going through my Capra. Galesburg's another really flat track, a lot of character. And then they have those fence posts out in the back and that creek and everything. Like going down St. McLawn, that's pretty unique there. Yeah. Xenia, Westchester was a nice half. Columbus was another one that was like almost like a big circle too. It was like a third mile, very similar to that Mahoning, like a big Mahoning Valley. Yeah. Another cool track back in the day, and Sony would really see it on TNN. I wasn't there in person. There was a Syracuse Mile, and they would have the World of Outlaw sprints there, and they were going like, I think, 146 down the straightaway, and they were doing some airfoil things with their wings and stuff like that to try to flatten the wings out and some ultra speed. Dirt late models at DuQuoin, Charlie Schwartz, it was 86. He did a 24:85 lap, I think it was, on a mile track. And that was 146 miles an hour, 144 average. And that was with the big spoilers. That track there, those were horsepower cars, but the big spoilers. And that track it wasn't really tacky by any stretch. So it was just like they come down the straightaway, and you hear that the motors just like, then they were blowing a lot of motors that day because it was pretty hot. But you talk about that, but I was like, wow, these guys are really hauling. And Charlie Schwartz is like, this is the fastest I've ever gone in a late model. So that was a pretty cool time in there. Then you go look at Eldora, you know, 12 seconds, 12:60, they're going with the half mile all the way around the track, flooring it. And when you go there and you watch a race, it's like, wow, these guys they're really, really moving pretty good there. And that's always a cool experience there.
So one more thing I wanted to ask you about was rivalries. What were some of your favorite local rivalries looking back through the history?
Boy, I would have to say, you know, going back, it would be Larry Zent and Irie in like 85 when New Paris reopened, and that was going on to about 90, because then Denny kind of got out a little bit, and then that's when Zent, and then that kind of the super late, that Gold Cup series kind of evaporated. I think Denny was done after 88 doing the super lates. I couldn't remember right in that time frame, but that was a rivalry. And people, you know, Zent was always one. Either you loved him or you hate him. Denny, everybody loved him. They didn't really thought Denny was a dirty driver or anything. They always said, "Well, Zent, he's always got all the money and he's always this and that." And that was always a good time for racing there at that time. Boy, ASA. I remember, buddy of mine, Rusty, we're going to go up there for a race. And we got there kind of late because we had a car problem out in front of the house. Starter decided to go out. We got up there a little bit late, but Fred Campbell's mom sits on the top row, and she always reserves about 10 or 12 seats for somebody that shows up. Luckily, we got there, and she had 2 seats available, so we sat there. And Mike Eddy, I mean, he's just out of Coquitlam, you know, 2 hours, hour and a half away. Him and Sineker were racing for the win, and Sineker got spun out by Eddy, and that was about 4 laps to go, and Eddy wins the race. And boy, he got out of the car and they were booing him. I mean, I don't think they had about 10 people cheering for him. Everybody else was booing him, and then he's got to shake his fist and wave the flag in the air, which even stirred people up even more. Then Seneca's crew was kind of getting a little bit excited about it. And then the announcer, and he was talking, and he said, "That's just racing." He was in the way anyways. And they actually had to escort Eddie out of there with police so he can get out of the track because they're all parked in the infield. And Eddie's like, that crowd there, he said, that's not the place to spin out Seneca. But he says, but we were racing hard, and that had to happen, you know. And so that was always a good rivalry there with them guys. I mean, even the Butch Miller, you know, he was always good with rivalries, friendly rivalries and stuff. Kalamazoo back in the day, and Sparentak was always good with Denny for years. Spirals, that was Kalamazoo, the local guy, and Denny. They would go back and forth with a lot of feature wins over the time frame. Well, I'm trying to think back in any other time frame, even like kind of like supers. It was always Saunier at Sandusky was always very successful, and Bentley even owned the track for a couple of years. And the New York guys, and they always that rivalry, the Ohio guys versus the New York guys would roll in with the ISMA series and that. And, you know, that was always, sometimes the Sandusky guys kind of thought, hey, this is our track, you know, Schulich and them and Saunier, and then those Gosick and, you know, Abold and Bentley would come in and win the race. And, you know, they always had the fans saying, you should have taken that guy out. You know, I was like, well, we really don't do that kind of stuff with supers. You just race hard, and, you know, kind of the best guy wins. That's really about it. Now we have Drew Evans and Eminent down at McLawn now, where there's been some contact with them guys a couple times in the last couple of laps, and Eminent won a race, and some people were yelling at him, and the car owner Brian yelled back at the fans, and that was, I think I started and stopped that interview like 4 different times. And then I had to just keep covering the mic up because Travis was down there that night. And I said, I told Travis, we can't get started until these people settle down here. We're going to have all kinds of profanity on our track microphones. So we had to be careful with that one there. And, but it was all in fun. I mean, they're parked right across from each other. Just heated rivalries. You know, they're racing, you know, putting on, people get in the stands, get excited about that. That's really about the most of the time I really seen something going on. I mean, Stovall in Fort Wayne, they always thought he was the golden boy because he came into the Moose Myers ride and, you know, always had everything preset. So anything Stovall Scott did is that everybody was going to boo him because they thought, he's not Moose. And then they were like, he forced Moose out of that car, and now Moose was going to get out of racing anyways. And so if Stovall won, it didn't seem to matter. Even Zent sometimes, he won at Fort Wayne, didn't seem to matter. They still would boo him anyways. And but I mean, Larry put a lot of money, you know, put out a lot of money, National Serval, and he sponsored a lot of shows and stuff. But no matter how you do that, it's kind of like with Trump. No matter what you do, sometimes people just ain't gonna agree. They're just gonna want to bicker about it and stuff there.
One thing I wanted to ask, and I know we're getting tight on time here. It's 8:33, so just to kind of do like a time check. Okay. You have the Michiana Vintage shirt on for racing. So do you want to talk a little bit about, you know, you talk about all these names, you talk about Stutzman, and all these different types, and you do a lot with the vintage racers. So do you want to talk a little bit about how you got into vintage race, like the vintage racers, and what you do with that group, what that group's about, where they travel, why they travel there, or what the goal is? I know obviously Yorks are a big part of that, but you're kind of like the voice and I think president or something of some role within their group, right? So if you want to talk a little bit about Michiana Vintage Racers.
Yeah, we started that, I believe, in 2000, and we had Pat wanted to get some guys together. They had a show at M40 with the super mods, and I brought my books and got talking to Pat then, and he's like, I'm looking at starting a vintage group. Would you be interested? And I go, well, I don't have a car, but I got the books. You know, that'd be a start there. And I said, I could maybe even write stories if it came to it. And so we had their first shows. We had like 5 shows the first year, and we had about 8, 10, 12 cars. Guys would come from Illinois, Wisconsin, a couple down from Wisconsin, a little bit on the southern end of it. A couple guys from Ohio, mostly Michigan, Indiana. We started broadening out. I think we've been to about 32, 33 tracks over the years. And this year we have shows. Let's see, it's going to be Plymouth, New Paris, no Kalamazoo this year. We're going to have Corrigan Oil up in Lansing, and we're on the schedule for Winchester. Hopefully you get some guys that will come down there for that. And then That is really going to be our shows this year. We got nothing planned for Angola this year. We have been there usually Labor Day weekend, and we've had as many as 10, 11 shows a year, and as few, I think one year we had 4 with all the rainouts. And it's just a bunch of guys that used to race or have interest in racing. They found a vintage car or they replicated a car and just want to take exhibition laps. We don't really run for, we don't get any money. We just get 2 free pit passes. Cindy and Mary Peters, they do like a cookout for us and everything there. You can bring food and have like a good, nice turnout there. We got Mike Bontrager, who used to race in that group. Kevin Snyder, Fred Reed's son-in-law. There's a couple Fred Reed cars are in that. Then the Yorks with the either like the sprint cars predominantly now. Pat did have a vintage supermod at one time, a rear engine car. And we'll get some other guys that will dabble down. I think we lost 6 members in the last 3 years with the head cars. So, we've kind of taken a hit on that. But it's just a group that we just travel around to different shows. There's the VART group in Ohio, which is just like our group. Ron Gunderman's pretty much running that group over there. And they do a lot of shows now down at Shady Bowl. They do a Thunder Series, which they kind of semi-race a little bit. And they do just a couple other dirt shows now. They're kind of limited on what shows they're doing. And like we'll go about anywhere. We're going to Grand Rapids actually this year for the Supermod weekend. So I've been pushing for that for a while, and I'm glad we're going up there because the material I got kind of doesn't do a whole lot of justice taking it to 40 with Supermod Oswego books. You go up there and people be like, "Oh, smokes, what you got there?" And so that's gonna be cool to be with the Supermods and just to get the sight on what's going on there. And let's say so we've been about it's been 25, 26 years. I think Pat, myself, Bob Roche, he doesn't have a car, but he's still alive. And Randy Peters, I think that's it for the people that started that group that's still alive. There's 3 of us still alive from that original deal there. And we said we lost a lot of members. A lot of them guys were like in their 60s and 70s, and just things happen and health reasons and stuff. But I'd bring the books. I only announce like 2 or 3 shows now a year because with McLawn, it's like I try to do I get to do the New Paris show for sure. Butler is a VARC show, and I've made that show the last 2 years now. I missed that for a couple of years with McLawn racing every other week. It's like I just try to make sure I can be at one of the shows. If we do Corrigan, that's going to be a dandy one there because that's 180 miles up the Lansing. And then I got McLawn the next day, and I told Pat, I said, that's a 600 plus weekend. There's no way I'm going to be able to swing that. So I wouldn't say I hope for a rain out, but if we do have a rain out, hopefully it's one where you can do a show and do that kind of stuff there. But we bring a lot of the books on display, and guys talk up the racing. We do like a cookout meal thing for like pretty much the club members. And then we get together at Jim Swain's place right across from Union City. He lives in Union City, Michigan. He lived right across from where that tornado was at up there a couple months ago. And they were actually able to see it across the lake. And then we get together at Mike Bontrager's place. He's got like a barn. It's got all like a history of stuff in there and get together. And there's about 25 of us basically in that club. And it's just fun to like racing enthusiasts and talk stories up. And we always get other people, I want to get a car sometime and do this and that. And it's like, okay, sometimes it works, sometimes it don't work. But Tony Libretto joined our club. He's got a car, and Glenn Eamon's got a car that he had in 85 at New Paris, like a late model. He's that 48 car, real sharp looking ride. So, I mean, we think the show at New Paris last year, I think we had 12 cars there, I think it was. And, we don't need 16 on the track to run. That can get kind of dicey. When Angola, we'd have like 24, 28 cars show up with VARC, and then we divide them in 2 groups. That's still a busy track out there with those groups. We try to do the hot rods in one group and then the slower guys in the other group and stuff there. And we get to talk it up, and kids get to sit in the car, and it's just history. And, a lot of people just think that's pretty cool. And it's pretty fun. It's kind of the bittersweet. We know that some people are up in age and, he's got some health concerns. Got to be careful here, and then things happen and, they pass on and that. But the great memories with these guys. And I'm glad Pat started the group when he did back in, 89, 90. And because, there was a Midwest group and there was an Ohio group, but there was like a Michigan group, but they were kind of disbanded. So he kind of started it up in this way. And like I said, I think we've been to 33. I have to look that up. I think we've been to 33 tracks over the years, some dirt tracks, been to Hartford and Thunderbird, Open Show. Like I said, we got Grand Rapids before, Kalamazoo, Galesburg. Let's see. It was Lansing, Angola, Fort Wayne, Winchester, Indianapolis, Plymouth, Toledo, Sandusky, Lorraine. I'll have to get an ad up. Ileana. So it's a pretty fun deal. But I say with me and doing McLawn and doing the photos, I only get to do about 2 shows a year now. So I can make this one, Pat, but the other ones just they ain't going to be able to make it, unless we get a rain out or something there.
If there's only one of you, right? There's one of
Yeah.
you, and you're.
That's only the good part, bad part there.
So I know it's 8:40. So what time do you have to get going?
Usually about 45. So I got about 5 more minutes there.
Right. So what we'll do is, I'll probably get like a part 3, just because again, I feel like we still only scratched the surface with you, and we've had you since like 708. So maybe we'd have like a Ron's Corner every like once a month or something like that. Just a Ron Verash episode to tell more stories, because you have so much to share.
Yeah,
So,
the photo books and just what we have in those books. There's lots of good stuff. And, I try to just piece out the best stories there is. And, sometimes you take a book there and it's like not open all at once. It's like, oh God, that's a lot of weight drag, but it's still, someone's going to see it. And then other shows, people are like, oh my God, look at this stuff. And it's just good because you gotta keep track of this stuff somehow.
I was going to say, you shared with me, and I posted online shortly after the Top Gun Auto Show about the Johnny Russell, Bill Russell car. So while we're closing up, maybe that's the story that we can end with, is if you want to tell a little bit about that story in that car that's Concord Autorama, right?
Yeah, Racerama. And actually, Johnny got with me and he says, I got this car, the old Chevelle that we had. But Dad doesn't know anything about it, so we're going to bring it to the car show. And I said, okay. I said, I won't put it on the entry list either. So he brings it in Friday night on the flatbed, and people are like, what's that? It was all covered up. Chuck Maggio did the same thing, I think, that same year with that 55 Chevy. He kept it all covered up. This is a surprise because he was going to debut it at the car show, that street stock he had. And so we brought it in. We kept it covered up. Well, then Friday, it was kind of dead in the morning, so I took the cover off. I started taking pictures of it. And then him and Bill and Ed was going to come out Friday night. And so then we're kind of waiting. And the car was covered up. And what's going on with this car? It's just covered up. No big deal. And so then them guys come walking in, and the car was still covered up. And everybody's like kind of following them. And I tried to have the camera like for like the moment they're going to be surprised to see it. And Johnny uncovered it, and Bill was like, oh my God, check this out. So that was kind of a pretty cool deal. And then probably thought there was a riot over there, but about 100 people kind of standing around looking at the whole thing going on there and stuff. And Bill was like, and Johnny's like, we did all this and Bill didn't know anything about it. And so that had to be quite the deal there. And, Bill's like, oh my God, check this out. You're going back 1980 with that car, 1979. So that was really cool.
Well, I'm just leaving the picture because I think that, if I remember, that's the car that they had at the auto show this year. So
yep, same car.
Because I even went back last year's show and I went, nope, that was a Batmobile sort of deal. So I was trying to think, like, I know I've seen pictures and I can't remember if it was maybe the year before, because them and Kalamazoo have been going the same amount of years. We both arrived at the same time to the auto show, and so I'm like, maybe it was in the year before that they had that kind of car out there, because I remember seeing pictures of it. It might have even been you sharing pictures, but
yeah, because they had it, then they had trouble getting it started and stuff, and they're going to race it as a street stock or something, and then just like we'll get to it later, and other projects took off after that.
Yeah.
Now the track's probably taking some time away from the car too a little bit.
I'm sure.
Well, again, I know we're right up against the button here, but I know, like, Sheldon Lindlag, again, just that race. If you've not watched that 4-cylinder race from New Paris with Sheldon, again, huge congratulations. I didn't make it back down to Sheldon after I got everything packed away, but then I saw he was pulling out behind me when I was leaving, and I wanted to get over there to congratulate him. Because again, that was pretty impressive. But he got on here, saying, I'll show it. Definitely appreciate the story that you're, telling and remember over the years. And I know a lot of people have jumped on and been busy in the comments sharing those throwbacks. And so again, we'll probably, like I mentioned, we'll have like a part 3. Maybe it's just like once a month we get you on here when your schedule allows, and because I know you're busy, like you said, and get you on and maybe just tell more stories, and we'll have more racing by that time, and maybe people will, someone will remember another story that will trigger something, because again,
Yeah.
we have the super modifieds that we could talk about from the New England area. We have, all these different things going on. So again, we haven't even really opened the book yet. So so again, Ron, I know they say it, and I know I've said it before, but I just definitely appreciate everything that you've done for this area, and everything that you've done to keep the sport alive. And I can't even be half of you, but I'm going to try my part to fill in where I can, because I know you're one person and you can't be everywhere. Just like Boozier's one person, he won't be able to be everywhere. I'm one person, I can't be everywhere. But together, us three, we're trying to do our part just to keep this thing that we love alive.
Yeah.
So again,
For
I know
sure
you
there.
work, and storms are coming, so definitely be safe tonight while you're out there and everything. And we'll have you on back here probably in a couple weeks again.
All right. Thank you so much, guys. I'm gonna get my clothes on. Oh,
Oh,
not my
yeah.
clothes. I get my jacket on. Already
Yeah.
got my shirt on.
I was about to say, I hope you got clothes on, Ron.
Oh yeah, I'm fully dressed here. So you guys take care now.
Yep. Have a
Have a
great
good
day.
one, Ron. Thank you.
Thank you again. But again, everyone, thank you for joining us tonight. We're not quite ending yet. We'll wrap up with a few thoughts from the weekend. Talk a little bit about Springport and my excitement. That's kind of the talk of the town a little bit for for social media. But again, we'll have to have Ron back on again, just because we're still only scratching the surface with him, and we could have kept going if he didn't have work coming up. So why don't we debrief a little bit? So what stood out to you from our conversation with Ron this time?
I mean, I could just listen to Ron's stories all night. When he had his prepared notes at the beginning, and he was just going through some of his favorite times, like favorite traveling series and stuff like that, that I could just sit there and listen to that stuff all day. Him just naming names off. Yeah, awesome stuff. I love having Ron on.
Well, and it's one of those that, again, you and I have talked, Ron and I have talked directly about, like, he is such an encyclopedia for this area. And, it's one of those, like, who takes over from there, right? Because there's going to be a point where, he's going to decide to say, hey, you know what, I just don't want to do it anymore, or can't do it anymore, or it's impossible to do it anymore, right? I mean, you just don't know how life goes. And but it's one of those that I know, like, you're doing your part with your Boozoo Chronicles, and telling those stories of tracks past and present. And so, and I know you're working on other episodes, and you're busy, you're one person too, right? So so again, that's where I know next week we have Tim Dibble will be on, and I'm excited for him, because he used to race. They raced over at Hartford, before they decided to own it and everything. So there's actually in the concession stand at Hartford, you can go in and there's a picture of Tim racing. I want to say in a pro stock, or something like that. So, right there on their pit concession down below. And so there's a couple photos in there, but he raced on it when it was the half mile. Then obviously we could talk about his perspective with the 3/8, but having, again, someone like Tim on, I think he's going to have a lot of stories to tell, and and obviously preview the upcoming Hartford season. But he is a racer, and we can probably ask him some, Ron mentioned this or Ron mentioned that, and and we'll probably be able to recall some things. So again, that's where I look forward to Mondays, and I've actually, I mean, it's really pushed me to get some of the editing done on Sundays, even though that was my day off, because I just want to rejuvenate right from the weekend. But it's like, okay, we got to get ready for the show on Monday, because I just look forward to our guests every week. So, I do want to do like a quick, little blurb, because we didn't do one at the top of the hour. But again, for the Monday Night Rewind, if you guys help us, like it, share it out. Like I see, we have 30 likes so far, just on Top Rose stream, I think. But share it out. Let people know to take a listen and join us on Mondays to come. Obviously then on Thursdays we have the Thursday Night Throttle, but if someone can't watch it live on Facebook, it is on YouTube. The video version, it's the same thing. And then even on Spotify, it's a video version. So when we're done with the show, I always download it, put on Spotify. Then from Spotify, it disperses out to audio formats on Apple Podcasts, which it seems that's where a lot of other people like to listen, is on Apple Podcasts. And then there's Amazon Music and iHeartRadio. So again, it's all free to watch and all free to listen. If you get in the car and you have a long road trip and you want to listen to a show, we definitely invite you to. And just a quick reminder too, for this Thursday, the throttle returns at 7 p.m. where we'll preview the upcoming weekend. It'll be a very similar format to what we did last week, where here's the Friday schedule. Lord knows there's rain in the forecast again, so we have to do the caveat just like before, like, hey, this is what we know. But Kalamazoo literally canceled while we were on the show, so that made that graphic like irrelevant quick. But came to the show, and they were the only one that survived on Friday. But again, the Thursday Night Throttle, that's a quicker show. That's we tell you what's going on, we preview, we talk, shoot the breeze, get really engaged with the comments more so than even tonight. And so again, that's a shorter show, a little different, where this one goes a little bit longer into the night. So again, I definitely appreciate everyone who joins us on a Monday. We have a lot of people who are very consistent. So that's something I definitely appreciate. But real quick, I know you commented on the Springport thing, and I've known since the auto show, and apparently other people know too, if you didn't get to know that. There's some bragging with that, and it's like, okay, whatever. But I was at Springport for 2 years, so I was very invested, and actually invested a lot of money for my budget, a lot of money into Springport, doing a lot of different things for the drivers there, because even at New Paris, they were talking about it a little bit, and not even one person who I interacted with at New Paris who brought it up had anything negative to say about Donnie. Donnie just has such an infectious leadership style to him, where he takes on way too much on his own, and he knows that. But he gets things done, and he has loyal people. A lot of them are family, but he has a lot of loyalty with him. There are drivers who miss Springport. So again, speaking of, we were talking about Chris earlier. So let's, she's loving. We were talking about Chris, so maybe that's maybe that's why she joined on, because we were definitely talking about you in all the good ways. We know how big of a host fan you are, and people are doing wellness checks on you. Just make sure you had a pulse, after all that. But I know I'm excited for Springport, and I know a lot of people have been asking, drivers and fans, are you coming back to Springport? And I'm like, that's up to Donnie, but I'm also at New Paris, and so they're not racing this year. I can tell you that. If the earliest I think would be Michigan Cup, if they race at all this year, and I think they might be similar boat where they have to get something in before the end of the year, but I could be wrong on an ordinance. I don't know for Springport. Yep. And but I know that's something that they've kind of been working towards and on, and I'm excited to see what they can do at Springport. A lot of, I don't know, have you been to Springport before?
I have not. That's why I'm so fired up. I thought I lost my opportunity to visit Springport.
Yeah.
Now Donnie back involved, I'm excited to have the opportunity. Our guy from our shop, Hollywood Trussell, who races with us, he went up to the Michigan Cup a few years ago, and he had a blast. So we've got a big red circle around that, and I'm glad we have our opportunity back to get back up there.
Well, and you're such a nerd for history too, racing, and that's a compliment.
No, you're correct. You nailed it.
I'm nerdy for history too. Like, I love history stuff, and so if you go to YouTube, I'll try to find the links. There's a series that starts from groundbreaking, because that track, he called it Michigan Ideal Speedway, and he had worked at MIS, and so it's very similar to MIS. But the Galesburg owner at the time challenged him and said, if you think you could do it better, go build your own track. So literally plowed down. It's like Field of Dreams, but in a racetrack. Like, it's actually, watch the movie Field of Dreams, and it's like he literally plowed down a cornfield and built this track and called it MIS for Michigan Ideal, Speedway. And they have a museum there. But there's a series on YouTube. A former announcer narrates it all the way through construction. I mean, that track was almost washed out by like a monsoon rainstorm that was like a 100-year storm or 1,000-year storm, and it narrates. It's 3 parts, but it goes from breaking the ground to the couple races. They talk with Russ Densmore all throughout. They show how the Amish built the walls and all these different things. And so, if you're a sucker for that, that's where I don't know if that's why I fell in love with Springport, is because I'm a sucker for the history, and like someone literally gambled their life, savings and all that on this. But after the races, I would always try to sit and turn 4, even for just 30 seconds. Just sit there. It was all dark, just kind of take it all in, because it's like, there's something special about that place and the people. Not only, like 7 people ran that whole thing between Donnie and his family, like 7 workers manage that whole thing. And
Yeah.
some tracks have 40 people managing a race day, and they did it with 7 at Springport. Plus like concession workers and like that whole site. But
Yeah.
back house, like 7 people just manage that whole thing, and all family. And but that's something that you even stand in the infield and you watch that backstretch with the banking, and I don't know, it's just something special. And those drivers up there are really special. They make it a very family environment. So I know I'm personally excited for Springport. I don't know how much I'll be at Springport. Again, that's even up to Donnie if he would even want me at Springport. Certainly if people want me at, if drivers or fans want me at Springport, be like, Donnie, you got to bring Lewis back. But like I said, I even talked with him that, I'm committed with New Paris, and I absolutely love being down at New Paris and supporting those drivers and Chris and Tracy. So it'll be what's their schedule going to look like and all that to get up there. Because again, they gave me an opportunity at Springport, and I just, I did everything I could to not only get drivers there and promote that, but even get fans in the stands there, because that's what it's such a small area up there, and then you got to go like 100 billion miles off the highway just to get there. It's not 100 billion, by the way, but
Yeah.
it is a
A little
while.
less.
It is a little while off 94, but listen to Charlie Hanna talk about their first time when him and Sage went up there. He's like, it's just farm field, racetrack, and then it's not even a small racetrack. You're like, holy cow, it's like a huge freaking palace here. And but that racing is definitely worth it. So you need to get up there. I know you said you got it circled, but I'm excited because that's a track that's coming back that we could have lost. And so
tracks don't come back very often, so we need to appreciate this one that it is.
And knowing what Donnie has done in Galesburg with his time when he was a promoter there, what he's done at Kalamazoo, 90 cars or 93, whatever it was, on opening night at Kalamazoo with 3 classes.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't even have our 4, right? So I'm excited to see this week when we have our normal, front wheel drives, which obviously with the autism race, that might pull a few other drivers, chasing a little extra money. Then you have the straight stocks, which I'm just, straight stock racing in Kalamazoo can't get any better. But that limited class, and I know a couple drivers raced at Galesburg over the weekend. Jerry Pierman did really well with his car, and he seems really excited for that. So again, I'm excited to see all the new drivers in the limited group, and then obviously templates. That feels like it's the most wide open it's been in a couple of years with all the changes during the off season with drivers retiring and stepping back and everything and moving up. So, I'm excited to see who takes the bull by the horns in that class and declares themselves the challenger. And with Springport, I'm excited for that. I'm excited for Donnie. He pours his heart into everything that he does. So I hope everyone gives them a chance when they open that up, because they're going to need it. They're taking it on a lot, to make this go. And Springport's been tough, for any owner in the history. It's had a lot of history, not always good history with it, just a lot of closing time and different things. So when it opens back up, I hope fans show up and pack it as much as they can. Because as I would always tell Donnie, I said, I don't get paid enough to fluff anybody. I always told him I'd put up your show against anybody's. And I know sometimes, the knock was, well, they only have 8 late models. Yeah, but you know what? Those 8 late models, you got Race Bible in there. You had John Trudell. You had Jerry Pierman. You'd have Joey Barnhart in there. You just had so many great drivers where I'm like, they may not have the quantity, but they have the quality. And oh, by the way, two of the drivers you just talked about won at Kalamazoo. So, and they beat everybody at Kalamazoo. So, it's one of those things that it's like they had a lot of quality there in modified racing. If you love modified racing, watch them at Springport, because that's where I fell in love with modified racing again. I kind of got out of it. I wasn't a big fan of it, but watching it at Springport, I'm like, whoo, this is exciting. And just modifieds that will sell the ticket in itself. But
just as I said, racetracks don't come back very often, and especially, I don't know, support that while we have the opportunity. We lost the opportunity, we have it back. It's important that we get it right this time. Make sure you support Springport and Donnie and everything that's going on there. It's very exciting. I'm fired up. I'm ready to get up there. So I'll see everybody up there when we can.
Yep. So definitely stay tuned to their Facebook page as more comes in. And again, for Sheldon, obviously everyone has a really heavy heart from last week. I know today was Faith's birthday, but again, for Sheldon, my win Saturday was for Woody. Like Drew said, he was holding my wheel. And again, I think Jeremy Wardinger, he's underrated in a lot of ways. I don't think people give him a lot of credit for the announcer that he is, and he's a Tony Eldridge, learner. Like he learned from that tree, and obviously, I mean, Tony could sell you paint drying and make it sound like the most exciting thing that you've ever watched in your entire life, and and feel like, man, paint drying is really exciting, and but Jeremy, he does a lot of the Night of Destructions and he can entertain the heck out of the crowd. But he did awesome, for weekly racing. He could do that too. And, he tries to know stats and all these things, but he was telling quite the story. Like it was almost like storytelling with the 4-cylinder because, the way he kept saying for Sheldon, if you listen to the audio, even if you just don't watch the picture, but just listen to the audio, Pride of Lions chasing Sheldon down and just, it's because that's what it felt like. You got all these mini stocks chasing down a front, outlaw front wheel drive that is
all these Harmans.
You got all the Harmans. Again, they could have wrecked him 3 times and they didn't. So huge kudos to them because Chris could have taken him out going to the checkered. He could have.
I mean, he didn't have to pull left. Yeah,
he did not, and he could have taken everybody out, right? And they didn't. So huge kudos to them. And leaving it all on the track. But again, for Sheldon, his win was for Woody. Obviously, Michael Wood, a huge part of the National Compacts. Sheldon's one of those founding, drivers of that group with Drew and all of them, and many other names. So again, I know a lot of the people on Saturday at Galesburg had heavy hearts, with Woody not being there. But as Drew said, as many others, we saw last Thursday, he'd want us to laugh and keep going and, just do our thing. And so, again, but watching Sheldon race, if you didn't watch that, if you don't watch anything else in my video, go watch that, because that was definitely, I think that was the race of the night, even though Andrew and Bug did the things that they did and they dominated once they got out front and just that 1 minute and 11 seconds of that street stock race with all the lead changes, Haley Bull leading a lap and getting out there, even though she was nervous as all get out to do that, she did it. And I went down during intermission, I'm like, you're nervous, you're out there racing, for a win in the heat race and side by side and you look comfortable. And I said, remember, you're a bull, what you do.
Yeah.
It's in the lineage, it's in the blood, right? But that minute 11, told a lot, but Sheldon holding off all those ponies. I mean, I don't even know if you call them ponies. They might be like gazelles or whatever, think whatever the fastest animal is, pick that. And but that was impressive. So if you watch nothing else from New Paris in my YouTube video, go watch that race and watch it all unfold. So
here, new closing segment coming up with it on the spot. Was that your favorite thing that happened at the racetrack this week? Mine was the Crown Vic feature at M40. I think they put on a great show. We talked about it a little earlier. The Terrys were about putting each other in the wall. Sullivan and my buddy Ronnie Holloway always puts on a great race when he's in it. That was my favorite thing at the track this week. And that Uncrustable. I'm going to mention that again.
I saw his post when he's like, be a fluffy cloud, be a fluffy
yeah.
cloud.
So Ronnie got a little excited in the heat race, and we've had this discussion. We're not going to be the old Ronnie anymore. We're new Ronnie. New Ronnie's a fluffy cloud. So.
I'll answer. The reason why I paused and not because of hesitation, because I'd pick that, but I'd also pick the camaraderie that I saw in the pits. It was almost like even the week before at Kalamazoo and New Paris, where everyone was just kind of glad to be back, right? And obviously, when competition gets going, that's people get worked up and the adrenaline gets rushing and all that kind of deal, and so then you're kind of like, man, it's like mid-season form, but Sheldon, what he did, that would probably be one, and then two would be just the joy it seemed like people had being at the track.
I like
and
that.
So it's like we need to remember that, life's short. If Woody's, anytime someone passes, we're always like, how do you remember them? And it's like, let's remember we only get to do this for like 20 weeks a year. If we're lucky, we just had a rain under Kalamazoo, so that's 19 times that we get to do it now, right? That we only get to do this so often. There are people in this area who would love to be able to go to a track that they've lost.
Yep.
You know, there's the track that they love to go to, and we have an opportunity to go to a track. I know it's very easy to go to social media and say things. I know it's very easy to go and be unhappy about this or that, or, you know, the flagman looked at you wrong with the black flag and you didn't like how they looked at you, whatever, right? You know, but just remember, we have that opportunity to do that. There are tons of race fans and there are tons of drivers who have parked. They don't race anymore. They don't go anywhere. They don't do anything because they've lost their track or their desire to do it. And so it's like, just remember, like, we only get to do it so many months. And this was a really long winter for a lot
It
of people.
was.
I mean, just
It
brutal
was.
snow and brutal temperatures and brutal at all. And obviously, just with the environment that, you know, society's in general, that's exhausting for people. And it's like, let's
Yep.
get joy. Let's just remember, you know, we can let everything go at the track. It's a lifesaver for a lot of people. That's how I
Yep.
got back into racing, not as a lifesaver, but as a mental check, a mental break from reality. You know, go sit at the track and I don't have to worry about anything, right? And so, I mean, there's things to worry about, but, you know, like,
Yeah.
I wasn't worried about my job. I wasn't worried about, you know, the things that were going on. And it's like I just went and sat and got to be around with people who, you know, I enjoy being around. So I think we need to just remember that, you know, even in the heart of competition and everything else, that um, we have an opportunity to be at a racetrack. Let's not take it for granted, because look at Ohio.
Yep.
How many tracks did they lose this year where now how many drivers have either A, just parked, they're not
Yep.
going anywhere, they're not going to race anywhere, they're not going to do anything, they're selling it all,
Yep.
or B, are lost and homeless and have to do what Ron said, put in 600 miles just to go race, 400 miles to go race. So if they race at all. So I think we
Yeah.
just need to remember that, you know, life's short. Just
Go to the races.
go to races.
Life's short. Go to the races.
A lot cheaper than going to WrestleMania. Let's remember that.
Yeah, I'm sure.
So,
I'm sure.
and MLB baseball game and all these other things, right? Like, you get to go and you get to have racetrack food and all
Yeah.
that. You know what, Scott? I know you can't see what I'm doing right now, but you'll know. Anyways, you know, Scott Gates again, you know, we have a great friendship. You know, him and Amanda, they just announced, you know, Amanda is pregnant. And of course, there are people,
Congratulations.
you know, I'm excited for them. And that's when they told me at the South Bend Auto Show, because I don't even remember what I was upset about, but because I won't tell you who, but there's someone who's engaged. I'm like, when did this happen? I didn't even know it was a thing. They kept it all under wraps. And I'm like, come on, you know? And so then Amanda's like, well, do you want to know something so you don't feel left out? And then I went, how many other people know? You know, not that it's any of my damn business anyways. They
Yeah.
have to be in their succession line of like first and third. But I was really excited for that because I have a great relationship with Scott and Amanda. And that started in 2022 at Super Shoe. So again, that's a friendship that started. Now they know when they're racing and I'm on the roof, I'm neutral. Internally, I'm rooting for everyone to be safe, have fun, go out there. You know, that's why with the safety team, I do a fist bump with them before every race night. I go, be safe, have fun. You know, I go over to KTS and because, right, they're risking their lives for fans and drivers. But so, you know, once the green flag is on and everything, it's, you know, it's neutral. But after the races, let's go celebrate. So, but for Scott and Amanda, obviously, we have a friendship. They're the reason I've gone to PRI. They got me into that. So, so again, that like some money is kind of what we mentioned earlier. You know, some people chase that. I thought your post was, you know, really, you know, well done that you did yesterday, because that's what we got to remember. You know, we're in this to do our part, and you know, we don't need to be center stage to do it. So,
No.
you know, I didn't want to host a podcast. You know, that was
Yeah.
like, I wanted to be behind the scenes pressing all the buttons for the podcast.
Yeah.
But I enjoy it, and I think it's gotten a chance for me to connect with a lot of people too in a different way. So other than that, I hear thunder coming, and with my luck, power or whatever, I don't know if you got thunder down there, but it sounds like over the lake is just behind me about, I guess, 2 miles if you went straight. So it sounds like it's over the lake. So we're at that time of the night where it's time to go left and turn fast, because
See you at the races.
see you at the races, and see you on Thursday night for the Thursday Night Throttle.